Right, good morning everyone. Welcome to the May Audit Committee meeting. Just run through the usual housekeeping rules first of all. So just remind you that we will be meeting at the Luttrell Room at County Hall going forward. So this is our last trip out to Shepton. Sorry for folks on this side of the room. Folks on this side of the room, maybe less sorry. Okay, so there will be a private meeting with our auditors after the audit committee is finished. So this is good practice. I've got it scheduled for 2:30, but I think we may arrive there before that time. The agenda pack, as always, is available via ModGov and on the council website. If you aren't able to make the meeting, I'd just like to remind everyone, please, where possible, arrange for a substitute. If members do wish to discuss any of the confidential content of the appendices for agenda items 8, 9 and 11, we will need to take a vote to move into private session before we can discuss the confidential items. Supplement 1 contains the reports for agenda item 10, the internal audit plan for 24/5. As always, when I invite you to speak, if you can please, for the benefit of anyone listening at home, please say clearly who you are. I don't know if we've got any members of the public in attendance today, but I don't think we've had anyone registered to speak at this point. Is that correct? No, that's fine. Obviously, as always, the audio is being recorded by the council and the meeting's being broadcast in the usual ways. So I'll move on to apologies for absence. So I've got Councillor Mike as well. Are there any other apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. I have been notified of Councillors Mike Caswell, Rosemary Woods, Habib Farbahai and Dawn Denton. We have some substitutes. We hopefully have Susanna Hart substituting for Rosemary Woods and Sue Osborne substituting for Dawn Denton. Okay,
thank you. So at this point, I should probably reflect the change that happened to the audit committee composition yesterday at full council, which is Dawn Denton joining the committee in place of Diogo Rodriguez following his recent appointment. So elevation, okay. So going to move on to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting, which I'd like to thank Andy for chairing for me. Thanks, Andy, for doing a sterling job. So firstly, for accuracy, I think there are a couple of items. Simon? Okay, thanks. I think there were a couple of items of accuracy. Nicola?
Yeah, so page 12, Grant Thornton issued a declaimed opinion, should be disclaimed, not declaimed. And further down, the 3 paragraphs down on the same page, David Bray did not take over from Barry Morris. David Bray took over from Grace Hawkins. So if that could be corrected, please.
Happy to second, Simon.
Okay, so I've got a formal proposer and seconder. All those in favour of accepting the minutes? Yeah, any abstentions? I wasn't here, so I'm going to abstain. Yep. Fine, carried. Moving on to item 3, declarations of interest. Any additional declarations for anyone? No. Okay. Moving on to public question time. I'm not aware of any public questions, so there is no session. Item 5, the auditor's annual report for 23/4. So I've got Sian here to present. Welcome, Sian.
Hello, thank you. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Sian Kenny. I'm Financial Governance and Policy Lead in Finance and Procurement. As you know, this audit committee receives an update on progress against the action plan in response to the 23/24 auditor's annual report at every committee meeting to support the committee's responsibilities. The auditor's annual report includes 2 statutory recommendations and 17 additional recommendations, and the report outlines progress against 35 actions in response to the auditor's recommendations, with 18 completed and 17 in progress. Paragraphs 8 to 12 of the report explain the updates that have been made to certain actions following a review to ensure actions and due dates are robust and timely. This includes reviewing and revising the due date for SR1-1 to a more realistic date, given the budget gap for 26-27 to 29-30, as reported in Appendix F in the MTFS report to full council in March, and also to align it to timescales for action SR2-1, which is scheduled by the 30th of June 2025. It also includes the addition of action SR1-4 that was identified in the management response but was accidentally omitted from the action plan when we first presented it to Audit Committee in March. And it also included the rewriting of action IR6-1 by splitting it into 2 actions, now SMART actions. Under paragraph 14, there are 2 tables that present the current status of progress in relation to recommendations and individual actions. Appendices A to F provide the detailed progress against each action, and these are broken into those that are complete and those that are in progress against each type of recommendation. Just wanted to draw your attention to paragraph 15, which presents the 5 actions that are in progress but are overdue. KR2-1 around this action is in response to Grant Thornton's recommendation that Children's Services should accelerate its response to the 25-26 budget setting process and focus on areas of improvement identified in the auditor's annual report. The current progress is 80%, with work done regarding the consideration and scenario planning of savings and growth for 25-26. However, a transformation programme plan for 25-26 is still being developed, with relevant supporting business cases being pulled together. KR4-1, develop a plan to reduce the dedicated schools grant deficit. This action progress is currently at 35%, and there is a deficit management plan being revised, which will build on an existing DMP, deficit management plan, and the children's transformation plan that I've just referred to in KR2-1. KR7 is 80% progressed, and this action is anticipated to be completed at the end of May. Likewise, IR4-1 is also anticipated to be completed at the end of May, with 60% currently in progress. At a high level, the MTFS report to Corporate and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 28th of April sets out the approach to demand modelling, but more detailed documentations are being produced. And we also have appointed a post within Finance and Procurement to support demand modelling. And they're due to, they've been appointed, but due to start shortly. And finally, IR8, with the current progress at 60%, with a reviewed and refreshed corporate performance framework due to go to PRB, the Performance Risk and Budget Board, on the 3rd of June, ahead of seeking approval at Executive on the 2nd of July. So although these are overdue, they are definitely in progress, and although they have become overdue, the anticipated completion dates are imminent.
Okay, so opening to questions. Before I broaden out to members, I would like to ask you about SR1, so the transformation savings programme. So we've got 15% progress against our target, but a target due date of the 30th of June. Just asking, is that realistic? Who is the risk owner?
I think that one falls chair to Alan as executive director for for transformation. They are heavily working on it, and they're really working with procurement at the current time to look at the transformation partner to bring in. They're also, as Sian indicated, they are going through the business cases at the moment to ensure that we have everything in place for all of the transformation projects that are currently in flight. So we do have a number of things happening across the organisation that we need to pull together to make sure that the benefits, whether they're financial benefits or operational benefits, are pulled together and tracked so that we can actually see what progress that makes towards the savings, the budget gap that we've got for next year. And that's being pulled together with the view that it will be taken to through the executive at the beginning of July. So I think the end date of the 30th of June, the papers will be published. It's just that it won't go through the executive until the beginning of July, which I think executive is something like the 3rd, I think, from memory. 7th. Oh, it's been moved because of a clash, but it's the 7th. But papers would be published ahead, so we're hoping it's still on target for that date.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. So opening the floor for questions, Andy.
On the same question, did you say, Nicola, that you're with partnerships, did you say, or something, to deliver it? What was your word?
Transformation partner.
Transformation partner.
Transformation partner.
Is that an external company you're going to be using?
It would be. They're looking to support. So I think it's recognised that we wouldn't be able to transform the whole of the council without that transformation partner.
Right.
That would come in and have a look at complete services.
Right, okay. The reason why I'm asking that question is on Somerset West and Taunton, just before it was set up, we had obviously Taunton Dean Borough Council. They went through that same sort of thing with an external organisation, and it created absolute havoc for the council. They basically flattened the organisation, got rid of loads of key members of staff, that basically after the new council spawn, we had to employ people because they didn't understand the way that council worked. I'm just worried that when you bring in outside people to help you, that they don't always do what's right for the council.
Yeah. So members will be aware we've already done the workforce transformation project. So that completed or is in completion, that will be completed this month with everyone in place, and the outcomes of that presented for what it delivered. And that means that partner wouldn't be coming in to do that workforce transformation. If I could refer as an example, Newton have worked with us on transforming how we deliver our adult services. It would be that type of approach.
That's satisfactory, because I know that Newton do a good job with other organisations. I won't mention the names that difficult to have out. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important to know we are procuring it in a compliant way, so it might not necessarily be anyone that we have worked with previously.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Simon and Gwyl.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question, really. Sian, you mentioned that a couple of these items have been moved to become smart, and I want to understand what the transformation to smart means.
Thank you. Sorry, apologies. Yeah, SMART is a language that is used to ensure that actions are, and I'm just going to make sure I
Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic,
achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Depending on what project qualification you're looking at, they sometimes have different letters, but we've used specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. When we originally produced the action plan, we produced it in order to produce a response to Grant Thornton's report, and we identified some actions. In reviewing the action plan to make sure it is measurable, smart, etc., we've identified that some of the actions weren't allowing us to manage the expectations around what it is specifically we are trying to achieve in order to meet and to respond to the recommendation. So we've tried to make them clearer and more explicit so that we can measure ourselves against the action.
Excellent, many thanks. Something else for me to aspire to.
Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one or two things to sort of follow up on. I notice on SR14 there's budget training, appropriate training, financial governance, including finance and contract procedures. I just wanted to know what the width of the scope of this was, because of course it's all very well passing it on to budget holders per se, but there will be people who rely on those budget holders to carry out their jobs, and therefore an understanding of how the financial system works, its limitations and checks and balances is, I think, quite important. So I would like to know how far this training is intended to go, because clearly, if you're, what's the right word, you're not fully aware of how it all fits together, then your work programming may go awry. So I'd be quite interested to know that. I note that there are 3 red key recommendations. IR41, I'm afraid I must apologise for being completely ignorant, but I don't understand it. I don't know what it means. So if I can dig it out. No, it's not that one. Please bear with me.
The council should ensure the key knowledge regarding the model architecture and supporting data and processes is properly documented, and the ownership of the models is shared
to provide resilience. And this is 60%. It was supposed to be done by the 31st of March. But I'm architecture, presumably it's IT architecture, is it? I simply don't know. It's one of those things that I'm foxed about. One of the many things I'm afraid I'm foxed about. And IR8, which is, again, there's a 60% that should have been completed, but it talks about continued oversight and continue to development, to continue to embed. So as a continuous process, I'm interested to know why it's red and not regarded as ongoing, because it, if it's continuous, it doesn't have an end point or a goal. It's actually continuous, but it's marked down as red as having not been completed and only 60% complete. So I'd be just a little bit of insight into those 3 would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first one around training. So there's a wider training programme around good financial management. The intent of the overall action is to improve financial acumen across the entire organisation, and to ensure that there is a good understanding of roles and responsibilities around financial management. So there will be a programme of activity over the year, which will just be a continuous programme of financial management training that will be a blend of e-learning packages, face-to-face hybrid kind of meetings, training sessions. What we're trying to do immediately by the 30th of June is to respond to Grant Thornton's issue that was identified in their report, that there's lots of financial management briefings that go on across the organisation. So there were briefings around the medium-term financial plan, briefings around the in-year budget position, briefings around gaps, etc. But there was no dedicated training set up, and specifically around budget management. So that's immediately the training programme that we're going to be is for all budget holders, accountable budget holders, and those that are delegated from the accountable budget holder, which is ultimately the executive director, identifying all of those and ensuring that they all have the basic understanding of value for money, good financial acumen, financial management, their roles and responsibilities. So the difference between a budget holder, a finance business partner, a corporate finance officer, a project manager, all those people that are involved in financial management decisions. And then the third element of the immediate course that we're launching will be around the detail around budget monitoring. So you start with a budget, it's a plan, you have environments, you transfer budgets, there are decisions that are made, there are things that impact on your forecast. How do you forecast demand? How do you look at what your position might be at the end of the financial year, but also an ongoing position in relation to the medium-term financial plan? And how do you identify mitigating actions in response to something that is creating a variance? So a lot of detail in that. There will be an e-learning package that will sit behind that so that that can be used as a refresher and also for new starters. By the 30th of June, we will at least have that immediate training course and all those delegated budget holders have attended the course. Beyond that is the wider programme, financial management training programme, which will just be maintained and will run every year, for every new starter, refreshers, etc.
So IR 41 is that?
IR 41 is specifically about the core financial models that are used within adults and children's. If we refer back to the original Grant Thornton report, we've widened it to talk about all financial models. And I alluded to a new role that we've created within finance and procurement to support some of that complex demand modelling. We do have the architecture, it's spreadsheet based. We can develop that to help with use of Power BI, etc. And some of the activity that feeds into the financial models is using Power BI. So if we're looking at number of children placements, we take data from Power BI. It's about making that architecture strong and then also making sure that everybody that has an involved role in developing that demand and financial model understands what their role is and understands where they fit in the entire process, because it takes a lot of data to get through a complex financial model and at the end churn out that forecast that helps inform decision making. That documentation is ready at a high level, but it's not ready at the detailed level. To help with capacity, we've got this extra post that will not only produce that, but will help us document it.
One of the things that's come out of the financial crisis over the last 18 months is a suspicion or an awareness, perhaps, that council employees or people dealing with money were perhaps not as financially literate as they needed to be to carry out the job, which is why some of the controls were put in place in order to help restrict spending and make sure it was being done properly. I think what we're now embedding something that's going to, really reinforce financial management knowledge throughout the organisation. I think that's what you were saying. What I would like to know and seek reassurance is that this will be also embedded in the performance management, because we have a report later about breaches and waivers, and clearly we need to be looking at waivers. I think we understand, but we need to be sort of clamping down on the breaches as much as we can. And so therefore, if you've had the training, and we all know how easy it is to game an e-course, if you choose to, we do need to be able to follow it up and actually make sure that people have done the training, they do understand it, and they are able to apply it and implement it in their working lives. And I think I'd like some reassurance on that.
So the chief executive, executive directors and service directors have agreed that this attendance is critical, and they are expecting an attendance report back to them as the corporate leadership team. And they are expecting all delegated budget holders to attend the meeting in person, not just the e-learning's there as a refresher, as backup for people to go after this training session to then have access to immediate information.
I mean, we're investing a lot in this. It is incredibly important as to where the council is at the moment and will be in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think we really need to make it stick. Anyway, thank you very much.
Your last point, IR8, around the word continued. I have had conversations with the action owner about this, and we didn't quite get the smart action in here in time for this meeting, but we are talking about reframing the action so that we can make it smart and be clear on the expectations. But the action owner is clear that in order to respond to this recommendation within the auditor's annual report, that we need a corporate framework. And I think Grant Thornton had recognised that a lot of work was undergoing around a new corporate performance framework, but that we needed to continue to develop that and we needed to embed it. And so the corporate performance framework going to PRB on the 3rd of June and going to executive on the 2nd of July, although I think it's just changed, the date was just changed, is completing the task, and then work needs to be done to embed it.
Thanks. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to have a quick question regarding page 37, KR4. So it says the council should continue to develop and implement mitigating actions to reduce the dedicated school grant. And I noticed the first bit, it says to develop a plan to reduce the deficit. We've only got 35% progress on that, yet we've already done 5% of the mitigating actions. So I'm just wondering whether there was an easy win there, some low hanging fruit that we were able to action quickly before the plan was developed. Just seems a little bit unusual to me to be implementing actions before you develop the plan. Thank you, Chair.
So the development of the plan is building on a deficit management plan that already existed. So an annual plan is presented to the DFE or shared with the DFE. They have an opportunity to come back and ask questions around it. But that DMP, Deficit Management Plan, from last year already had activities in it that were carrying on into this year's Deficit Management Plan, and those were in train last year, so have already been completed. That's the 5%. It's just a carry forward of certain activities into the new plan.
I suppose on that line of questioning, it seems that children's services in particular are not necessarily on track with their outstanding actions. Sorry. I recognise that this is a complex area, but is the senior leadership team within that directorate buying into the need to complete these actions at pace? Heather, as I have you in the room.
Thank you so much. And of course, I do appreciate coming to these meetings. It gives me a triangulation, if you like, of where we all are with all of our plans. I think what I would say is that in the last few months, I've been very aware that the senior leadership finance team have been working together very well. Messages have been given very clearly from the finance team about where we need to be with our progress, and I think we're taking that as seriously as we can. There's a number, I think it's about 4 or 5 different business cases that we have in progress at the moment, many of which will be addressing these issues. I'm not saying we've always been brilliant on the children's side necessarily, and there's stuff they're waiting for from us, but the modelling work that's been referenced in one of the other lines is helping us. We've had external consultants in as well helping us with our business plans. We're getting them through, but instead of just doing kind of like small things, we've been trying to do big things that tackle big issues, and that makes the business plans quite complex. So I don't think there's any shortage of buy-in. I think it is the case that we can always do more and more quickly. And I'm very capable. I'm very much on the case. We have a transformation board. We also have a finance recovery board, which we guide to on a regular basis, and we have, I think we might say that during the budget planning we got a little bit eyes off the focus of looking forward, and I think we're back on it again now.
So what I heard is faster, quicker. Brilliant. Okay, any final questions on this? Otherwise we're going to move on. No, thank you, Sean. So moving on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the external audit plan. Welcome to Barry, and welcome to Oscar. Is this your first audit committee with us today, Oscar?
Yes, Chair. Yes, it's my first one today.
There aren't any initiation rituals, so you are. Don't worry.
That's good to know. Yeah.
There is cake later, though.
Well, that's good news to me. Should I introduce myself before?
Yeah,
I'll just introduce myself before Barry goes into the report. So yeah, I'm an audit manager on the audit. So I've been with GT for 8 years or so now. and I've been an audit manager for 2 years. I have worked on the previous county council before. I was the in-charge accountant for 2 years, so I do have experience working with your finance team. This year, I'm going to be working closely with David Bray as the senior audit manager to manage the day-to-day of the audit.
Brilliant, and welcome. Hello, Barry.
Hello, thank you, Chair. So I'll take you through the report. So apologies that I don't have a name badge, probably because David Bray's taken my job. He was a little bit surprised when he had his paycheck this month, as was I. So, Chair, members, if I can take you through the report, I won't go through all of it. I'll just pick up some of the key highlights, which I think are important to you. I suppose the overarching thing to say is that, as Nicola highlighted, we did issue a disclaimed audit opinion on the 23-24 accounts. So we're in an unusual position now that the council doesn't have certified audit balances from prior years. If it's any comfort, and I'm sure it won't be much, but if it's any comfort at all, you're in a similar position to 51% of other councils in the country. So you're not in the minority, just. The slides, and therefore we are committed, though, that we get back to giving you an audit in a timely way. So again, we're working with the audit team and the finance team to make sure that we can get the audit completed by the end of this calendar year. And again, if we are able to do that, that will mark a significant improvement. And we will keep the committee up to date as we go through that, as well as holding Nicola and the team to account as well. The audit plan starts off by going through the national position and some local context, which is there for your information. We've tried to make it as relevant as we can to you to reflect your local circumstances and the significant financial challenge that you continue to face. As I said, the government has taken action to address the backstop or the backlog of external audits on a national basis. And Somerset Council is in a fairly fortunate position that we only have 1 year that's outstanding. There are councils that we've taken over from other suppliers where there are multiple years that are outstanding. As always, we highlight the significant risks that we see in the council, and on page 62 we summarise those around the management override of controls, which is a standard non-rebuttable requirement of the ICES. And then we have land and building valuations, including council dwellings and investment properties, as well as your net pension liability, your group vehicles, PPE there, including those in opium power, and also movements in grants, PPE additions and REFCUS expenditure. Again, that's sort of tied in with the fact that we've not had that assurance from the prior year. The following slides go through a bit more detail of the work that we're planning to undertake in relation to those significant risk areas. And then on page 69, we identify the other risk, which isn't a significant risk at the moment because we don't know what the value of it is, but that relates to the implementation of IFRS 16, which is accounting for leases. Now, this has been deferred for a number of years within local government. The day of reckoning has finally arrived, and therefore it will be a challenge for many local authorities to ensure that those leases are calculated correctly. So we will be doing a large piece of work around ensuring that we've got the completeness and the valuation of those correct. Materiality is set out on pages 74.
Sorry, Barry, on that specific point, can I just confirm, is that the value of the leases that Somerset Council enters into, or the value of the leases that Somerset Council lets to other tenants, or both?
Thank you, Chair. So the change really is about bringing leases into the balance sheet. So it's where the council has a right of use asset. So you've got the leases that you have taken on, and therefore where you basically consume all of the economic benefit of those leases. Previously, they were accounted for by the lease company, but what the standard is now saying is, well, actually, you're consuming and have the substantial rights of those lease assets. So therefore, those assets should be recorded on your balance sheet. It was a significant move in the corporate sector, as it meant that many corporate entities' balance sheets increased significantly. Leasing is big in local authorities, but not as large as it was in some corporate entities. So again, that's why we're not sure what the impact of that would be. But it's a huge element of, particularly in Somerset's context, where you've got the predecessor authorities all merging together to make sure that you've got accurate records to be able to pull all that together and then make sure that the valuation is appropriate. Thanks for the clarification. We've set the materiality on the council this year at £23.2 million and the group of 24 million. So the council will always be a little bit smaller than the group, but obviously the council is the main component in there. So that's where much of our audit procedures will be undertaken. We also set a lower materiality in relation to senior officer remuneration of £20,000, and that's per individual officer, because we believe that's a politically and sensitive figure that members of the public will be interested in. We did do a lot of IT work last year as a result of the implementation of Microsoft Dynamics, and therefore our IT audit work this year will be limited to following up to see what actions have been taken against the recommendations that we've made, as well as testing some of the privileged access across those applications. And again, you'll be aware of some of the challenges there are in various sectors, both in the public sector and the corporate world, whereby cyber criminals are accessing systems inappropriately. So again, we do look at the cyber security arrangements that the council has in place. The value for money work, we've been talking about the progress that's been made by the council. So that work has already commenced, and we've got a series of meetings to start following up that work. And we'll be bringing the annual auditor's report alongside the audit findings report to make sure that we can close the audit down at the same time. And that will be identifying the progress made, as well as any emerging issues that we have identified from our value for money conclusions. But as you are aware, it was a challenging read last year across all areas of the council. So it is important that the council has particularly made progress around the financial position and the development of that transformation programme. So that will, as I'm sure you'll not be surprised, a key area of focus. Our fees are set out on page 88. You'll see there that the total scale fee wasn't charged to the council last year because we weren't able to complete the audit, but significant audit fees were still incurred. The scale fee has increased by inflation this year and has also increased as a result of the impact of the new requirements around IFRS 16 and the new requirements around ISA 600 that have also been introduced. The level of certification fees are also set out there. Some of those figures we've estimated because we just don't know at the moment how much time and work will be required around some of those elements. As always, all of the fees are subject to PSA approval. I can confirm that the firm has undertaken robust independence considerations to ensure that all members of the team, both the direct audit team and anybody else involved in the team, remains independent. We have disclosed on page 92 that we've sought authority from PSAA and our ethics team around my long-standing involvement, both because of Somerset Council and South Somerset District Council. And the rationale for that is, whilst I've been here a long time, you're going through a challenging period. So we feel it's important that you've got that continuity at that leadership level. That's been granted for the next couple of years. And then David can finally take his wish and take over should he wish to. Chair, I don't propose going through anything else on the plan for the council audit. Julie is online to do the pension fund audit, but perhaps we can take questions on this one first.
Okay, so opening the floor up to questions. I've got Will and Sue. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this doesn't get any better, does it? I think the thing that struck me was the IFRS leases, and my concern about the council's ability to provide accurate information about this. So my question was, frankly, do we have an up-to-date asset register? Because my understanding was part of the surveyors department, I think, took a big hit under the transformation. And so therefore, presumably, we're going to have to be hiring in people to help us do this and complete the job, which of course is an awful lot easier if you're internal rather than somebody coming in external. So I think there is an issue there, which I think I'm very glad you've highlighted, that does concern me about the nature of the leases that we may or may not hold and their particular value. There's also the valuation of the assets per se, which I think we need to be right on top of. Otherwise, our figures we're going to get another disclaimed. Anyway, another audit that nobody's very happy with. There was also something in here that said management override of controls is present in all entities. So I would like a little bit of clarification behind those 4 words, present in all entities. And then the final thing that struck me in the face was the misstatement in grants, PPP additions and REFCAs, revenue expenditure funded from capital under statute. Our inquiries have highlighted that the council does not use building experts to verify the stage of completion of projects. And I'd quite like a little bit more understanding. Sorry, this is Chartered Surveyor in me coming out on this one. Because if we don't know where we are with a project, I mean, release of there's so much in there that I would just like a little bit more background on that, if possible, please.
Sure. So I'll get Ben to pick up the first part of your question regarding the management override of controls. That's a standard thing amongst all organisations because you can never exclude it. Am I right, Barry?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, regarding the management override of controls, so there are 2 presumed risks that are required by the International Standards of Auditing. One is around management override. The second is around the recognition of fraud risk within revenue. So we've rebutted the second of those because actually the income that comes into the council is fairly easily audited. There's limited scope for it to be manipulated, but of course we do still do appropriate procedures around that. In terms of management override of controls, there is no ability to rebut that, and again, wouldn't be appropriate to do so in the council's case. In any case, we work on the basis that a robust control environment will be put in place, and again, that's supported by the work that your internal auditors do and the other control arrangements that are in place. But then we have to make the assumption that whilst you've got a robust control environment in place, management will always try to circumvent that. And the ways that they do that is by applying overly aggressive estimates, accounting policies, and through journal manipulation. So again, that's why we do quite a lot of work around journals. We look at the estimates and the valuations that have been put in place. So yes, you've highlighted PPE valuations and investment property valuations and pension valuations. Those are large figures that are based on judgment. So we will look at the judgments that the council has made to make sure that we understand those and that we can corroborate those with third-party independent evidence. So that's in relation to the management override. So just a little bit more of an explanation than the chair gave. In relation to the misstatements in grants, PPE additions and REFCAs, again, our preliminary inquiries is just identifying particular areas of focus whereby we believe that there may be a risk or that control environment is not as robust as it may be. So what we've done from our initial inquiries from officers and through other colleagues is identifying that actually in some areas, some of the controls that we would expect to be in place are not in place or haven't been operating effectively within the period. This is a national issue, and we're becoming, as a firm, increasingly concerned around some of these areas and the inappropriate treatment. And therefore, it's one of those areas that sort of bubble to the top of auditors' concerns, not just locally, but on a national basis as well, to make sure that there isn't any manipulation of those figures and that funding that's going through. So that's why we've highlighted it as a significant risk in this area. And again, it builds upon the fact that we were unable to take detailed work on this area last year. So it's part of that absence of cumulative assurance that is now raising this to a higher risk than before.
Okay, Ben, if you could pick up the IFRS 16 issue, please, and the asset register for Quill, please.
Yeah, morning committee, Ben Bryant, Head of Corporate Finance. So yesterday, so timely for today's committee, we've posted all of the leasing adjustments through the accounting system, and that's taken weeks and months of reconciliations against vehicles and property databases. That work started August last year. We did have an agency member of staff in specialising in the transition for those arrangements, and then the accounting team and property teams over the last 3 months have been finalising that. So we have got to that point that we will be compliant with IFRS 16 within this set of financial statements that we'll provide at the end of June.
Okay, any further questions for Barry on this audit? If not, I'm going to move on. Oh, Sue, sorry, forgot you.
It's okay. Thank you for your welcome, Chairman, and my sincere apologies for being late. It's not exactly my morning this morning, and compound it all, a laptop that decides it's not going to cooperate. It was really a comment to say I'm really actually welcome that Barry Morris can remain with us and doesn't have to move on simply because of the fact he's been here a long time, because I think we would have lost an awful lot of institutional knowledge. And bearing where we are at the moment, I do feel it's important that we do have a constant and stable team supporting us to prevent unforeseen problems. So I'm really pleased that we're not going to be losing an enormous amount of that institutional knowledge. So I'm pleased to see that.
He's going to need a bigger hat at this point.
Well, don't let your head swell too much, Barry. I'm sure we'll be coming back to you as well.
Okay, so Ben.
Sorry, Chair, could I just take the liberty to, for the moment, recognise where we are? So last year, we didn't get accounts out to the auditors till December, and we're looking at the end of June now. The auditors are really engaged with us as they were last year, and we'll cooperate and collaborate together. So that progress is 6 months earlier. So whilst we know that we went into backstop for this year, 23-20, coming into 24-25 that we'll do, this is part of our recovery now. We know it'll take a bit of time, maybe this year and next year, depending on how the audit goes and some of the audit bits that they won't be able to do in terms of the opening balances. But this is progress, which starts taking us back to where we were with those 11 sets of statements that all came through unqualified.
Thanks, Ben. That is important context, so appreciate that. Thanks for the ongoing work on this front. So moving on to item 7 then, which is the Somerset Pension Fund Audit Plan. Hello, Julie. Welcome.
Morning, councillors. Thank you very much indeed. Just for by way of introduction, my name is Julie Mashey. I'm the Audit Director within Grant Thornton, working alongside Barry, responsible for the Somerset Pension Fund audit. We've got the audit plan on the agenda this morning. It follows a very similar format to what Barry has just talked through for the council. The accounts for Somerset Pension Fund actually feature as part of the accounts for the council as a whole, as the administrative authority. There are some proposals potentially in the pipeline to decouple these accounts from that of the authority in the future, but for the time being, they are part of the same document. However, we do issue a separate opinion on the pension fund to that of the council. Barry's already talked through some of the ongoing challenges in relation to opening balances for the council. In relation to the pension fund, we were able to successfully complete our work for the financial period 23-24, and so the opening balances challenges do not feature in the same way for the pension fund. In terms of the plan itself, we highlight our significant risk areas for the 24-25 audit. The key ones highlighted on our summary headlines page for you, which is on page 10 of our papers, page 126 of your pack. Those are management overriding controls, as you've already heard and discussed in relation to the council audit, and then also valuation of level 3 investments. clearly the pension fund holds a considerable number of different types of investments, and they are categorised on 3 levels depending on the level of complexity of those investments and the basis of which management have to estimate those valuations at the reporting date. Level 3 is the most complex of those and often require a lot of judgment and estimation and use of a number of range of sources to determine an appropriate value. And so we focus quite a lot of work in terms of understanding that basis of estimation and how those valuations have been calculated. And the final significant risk area relating to the actuarial present value of promised retirement benefits, which is effectively the total position in terms of the valuation of what would be payable out to your members should the clock stop at the balance sheet date. What would be the amount due to all members and pensioners within the fund? It's calculated on an actuarial basis using a number of different assumptions and a complex data set in terms of the membership of the fund, and it's actually included within the face of the net asset statement. So we need to have a look at the work of your actuary in terms of determining that valuation. You'll see we've set out the basis of our materiality, which has been set at 47.5 million, equating to about 1.5% of your gross investment assets. And we've also determined a lower materiality for our work specifically on the fund account of 15.5 million. In terms of the overall audit logistics, you'll see later in the report, it sets out some more details around our audit fees and the scale fees for the year. And you'll also note some details on the audit team. I'm pleased to say that we have Macaulay also on the call with us today, who is my newly appointed audit manager for the fund. Macaulay has been involved with the fund's audit for a number of years, and due to his successful promotion has now stepped into the manager role and is well known to the council, has been involved on the council's audit as well with Oscar for a number of years. That's probably the main highlights I would draw to your attention from the plan, Chair, but very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. I've got a question from Councillor Wren and Councillor Sully.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a question, it's an apology. I should have declared that I have a small Somerset pension, as does my wife.
Thanks for the clarification, Gwyl. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Under the audit fees, we've got the 23-24, we've got the 24-25. It's not actually the fees I'm concerned about. It's the in the 23-24 year, there was additional work required for journal testing, which is obviously important.
What page, Andy?
Sorry, page 144 in our pack. Journal testing, which is actually important audit, I think, in the sense that you're looking to see if there's any journals that don't look right, or I'm not saying suspicious, but may stand out, which is a good thing to do, to look at journals. But we're not doing it in 24-25. Is there a reason? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for your question, Andy. So at the moment, so the work we had to undertake, the additional work we had to undertake in 23-24 was specifically in response to one of the points that Barry mentioned earlier in relation to the council. Due to the implementation of Microsoft Dynamics, there were a number of significant control deficiencies that were identified in the 23-24 IT audit for the council as a whole. And consequently, that therefore raised a number of concerns around the overall control environment, which we had to take account of in designing our journal testing strategy. So what that resulted in for the prior year was, ordinarily we tend to test somewhere around, for a low risk council, around 25 items as a starting position. But due to that much high risk profile, because of those control weaknesses, we ended up having to test over 100 journals in the prior year. Now, it is possible that we may need to conduct some additional journal testing this year, but until such time as our IT work for the current year has been concluded to assess the level of implementation of those recommendations from last year, it's difficult to say at this stage to what extent we may need to undertake any further work. So it's very important you've highlighted that point, Councillor, but we will keep you updated once we've had final conclusions from our IT specialists as to what improvements have been delivered in the current year.
How satisfied, Andy?
That's satisfying, because you are going to carry on doing journal audits to to it, but it's not obviously the same amount unless there's any problems. So that's excellent. Thank you very much for the clarity.
Thank you.
Okay, barring any final questions, we're going to move on. Oh, okay, thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
So moving on to item 8, which is the risk management approach and refreshed strategic risks. So passing over to Sarah, I assume.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yep. Great, thank you. Yeah, so the paper and appendices that you have in front of you cover our refreshed approach to risk management and our refreshed strategic risk. So we're seeking your endorsement for each of these. The approach to risk management is something we've been working on over the past year. So we did have a risk management policy and strategy at vesting day. What we've been doing is through such things as the improvement and transformation programme, other areas, actually reviewing and refreshing our approach to risk to focus on being risk aware rather than risk averse. So the approach to risk management is detailed in Appendix A. This streamlines previous and existing documentation into a clear control framework, which is building on testing and learning, as I said, from the past 12 months. What the approach does, it explains the golden thread, which links up our priorities, the actions we're going to take, the risks that could get in the way, and building in also with that performance in terms of how we know whether we've achieved what we are trying to achieve. It also includes the 5-step risk management cycle and how we'll ensure or assure effective management of risks at different levels all across the organisation. A key element of the approach is how we analyse and assess risks, their potential impact, consequence, and what this would look like if we did nothing. So that's where we've got our inherent risk score, what it looks like currently, so that's our current risk score, and what our target is that we're aiming to manage the risk down to. So we won't always be able to, as I'm sure you're all aware, we'll not always be able to manage risk down completely. So what we are keen to do is to be really clear on where do we think we can target that approach. Also included is our risk scoring matrix, and that details how we make those judgments. There is one proposed amendment to the risk scoring matrix moving forwards. We are proposing to treat risks that are scored 10 as medium risks. So those will be coloured, the kind of yellow colour. What that means is that these will require quarterly review as a minimum rather than annually. And this is on the basis that they have either the highest level of either likelihood or impact. So as I said, the approach overall reflects a movement towards being risk aware, not risk averse, and encouraging our teams and services to question the impact and effectiveness, particularly of those risk mitigations, so those mitigating actions that we're putting in place, and reviewing and adapting those actions accordingly. As I said, we have tested it over the past year and it's been shared with yourself, I think back in November, and with various committees and stakeholders for feedback, and then incorporated into this single approach documentation. In terms of kind of moving forwards, we want to ensure that we're working with the organisation more to strengthen risk management. So embedding the approach that we are presenting to you today across the entire organisation. In terms of Appendix B and C, they detail our refreshed strategic risks. So we're proposing 10 new strategic risks. They have been worked up with our senior leaders against our changing business environment and context. We've also had external feedback from auditors and external reviews which have fed into the creation of those strategic risks. And this will be reported. These will be reported quarterly to Scrutiny, Corporate and Resources, Executive and yourselves as Audit Committee from Q1 this year, alongside our high-scoring tactical and operational risks.
Appendix 9B maps out the previous strategic risks and how these are reflected in the refresh risks that you've got. So you should be able to compare the two and be able to see where and why those risks, some of those risks have been closed. And Appendix 9C details the full risk descriptions, causes, consequences and mitigating actions. There is a confidential appendix. This covers 3 risk mitigations for our cyber attack risk, and this is restricted in line with exemption category 7. The only other thing for me to stress before inviting feedback is that these risks will be kept under regular review.
So, sorry, Sarah, just 1 second. If the mic's not on, the folks online can't hear us, sorry.
Oh, it wasn't.
Yeah,
has it just clicked
no,
off?
it just cut off.
I've just been talking for too long. That's what it's saying. That's the little timer that says, come on, Sarah, wrap it up.
The trap door opens after 5, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just this is literally the final bit is that, yes, we'll be reviewing these alongside our performance and financial data as well, so that we are reviewing and informing the action that we take as officers and as a council to respond to these risks. And now I will stop talking and turn my microphone off.
Okay, opening the floor to questions. So I've got Andy and Gwyl.
Thank you, Chair. Page 184, and also then it'll go on to 193. This is the about cyber attacks and recovery and whatever. Obviously, given the current news that's been going on with people like the Co-op and Marks and Spencer, I know last night it said that it's caused £300 million worth of damage to their organisation. They will not be doing online orders until July. It's caused major problems. Now, we've got it as a risk.
Sorry.
We've put it as a risk score of 12.
Sorry, Claire was just indicating that I've got a hand up online, that's all.
Oh, right, sorry. Thank you. The target score is medium and 12. Do you think that's high enough in the sense of what's been happening recently? We don't know what, obviously, most large organisations get cyber attacks daily, I understand. With obviously, they're targeting commercial companies because obviously they've got more money to pay in ransom, if that makes sense. So are we, do we feel that 12 medium is a high enough risk given what's happening at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Really, really good observation. And one of the things that we are, obviously these were pulled together as a list of strategic risks to be shared with the executive and then yourselves. In the very, very recent time, we have had examples, as you say, of the impact of this. What we will need to do and what the team will already be doing is reviewing this in the light of that. But I will feed back your comments in that space, and particularly in terms of the impact score. So a lot of the mitigations that, or a vast majority of the mitigations that we put in place help us to reduce the likelihood. Some of these, actually, the impact, if it happens, may not be able to be reduced. So what I will do is feed back those comments and double check that the team are reviewing that risk in terms of the target score, which I think is what you're focusing on here, is it realistic to get to that target score? There's also, of course, a question of when we would expect to get to that target score, and things change. You're absolutely right, all the time in terms of that cyber security environment.
Will.
Thank you. I've got 1 or 2 things, but just to follow up on that, I mean, my notes I've written here is the council really this vulnerable? And I think the thing that strikes me, I think Gloucester, there was something on the television the other day about Gloucester County Council, which got caught, and it cost them a huge, they didn't pay the ransom, but it cost them a huge amount of time and money. So clearly there is a much heightened risk, and the risk is not only that our systems aren't good enough and robust enough, because there are more and more people wanting to come and turn us over. That's what it looks like. And I haven't seen in here anything about nationwide intelligence on this and fitting, because there must be serious crime boards sharing information intelligence about how these people operate and just giving councils and other organisations the heads up as to what they need to do, the nature of the attacks that are coming, because they're evolving daily. And I just wondered if we were plugged into any national networks, because it didn't seem to come out of that. Because yes, we can do what we can do internally, subject to resources, which is always a worry, but actually there's a whole world out there that is going on that we need to be aware of just to make sure we don't get caught. The next one I was going to do was ORG 004, which is about the inadequate management of contracts. And I was quite surprised to see that the target score, bearing in mind that if you don't manage your contracts properly, it can be a serious problem. The target score for some reason is only 9. So we have a medium or just under medium likelihood and impact. And I would have thought if something goes wrong on a big scale, it could have quite a significant impact. So I would be looking to lower the score below that if it were me. The same question goes for 007, robust governance and decision making in making arrangements to the council. Why are we, our ambition is only to go to a 9. You would have thought that certainly on the circumstance we're under as an organisation, we should be trying to get right down to make sure that everything we do is robust and proper, shall we say. 10. ORG 10, the budget overspend, the failure of the council to manage its in-year revenue budget effectively leading to an overspend. Given that we will need a financial report just to get through this year, is the current score, I'm going to have to refresh myself in, is the current score actually realistic? The current score is 12. The inherent score, of course, is 25 because that's catastrophe. But bearing in my understanding where we are budget-wise this year, a medium risk, what was it, something like £100 million black hole we got to plug? A medium risk just seems to be slightly understating it. And that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Sarah, do you want to pick up any of those?
So in terms of the individual risk, obviously the individual service areas and the responsible owners are able to answer more eloquently on those than I would be, and I would offer the opportunity for my colleague Nicola Hicks to come in on risk 010. So yes, in terms of just to pick up the cyber attack, we have a strong team. They are there are wider networks they're involved in. One of the difficulties with talking about that risk in a public forum is actually that's where it's a confidential appendix in terms of what we're doing around that. So I wouldn't want to go into any more detail.
I've just discussed with Nicola a moment ago, it might be worth us asking for a member briefing on a particular subject, because that can happen confidentially and internally. Yes, there is absolutely heightened risk at the moment. So I don't know who could pick that one up for me, but if somebody could request that goes, what happens at some point in the next few weeks and months. Yeah. Thanks, Sue.
Shall I pick up Org 10, Chair, which is around the in-year revenue budget overspend? So I think this is scored as it is because of the mitigations that are currently put in place to enable us to achieve that. So we do regular reporting through the executive in terms of our budget monitoring. We've had the control boards that have been in place. So they have made a significant impact, I feel, on the outturn position of the council. I appreciate members haven't seen the final outturn position for 24-25 because we're just finalising that at the minute. But that does show a much improved position in terms of where we thought we were going to be in terms of using the reserves that we were expected to use to transfer into the budget for 24-25 is significantly reduced from that forecast. So I think it does show that actually the fact that we are in a declared financial emergency and we are working with budget holders around strengthening their knowledge, the information they've got, their ability to think about their expenditure, their compliance to the financial regulations, to contract standing orders. I think all of that in place does help. But obviously we will see that risk score may be adapted as we go through 25-26 in the regular reporting to show the forecast outturn position for the year.
I did notice that actually our desired position, the target score, only results in a reduction of impact rather than likelihood. So the likelihood is always going to be there at the current levels. And all you're trying to do is reduce the impact, which I think is quite an interesting way of looking at it. Back to what Sarah was saying, in terms of, you're just holding the ring on the whole risk management process. I'm just wondering who provides the challenge to the risk assessments that come forward apart from this committee, because somebody actually has to be looking at this. And I suspect that Councillor Lation is now going to tell us that the executive is all over this. But clearly, knowing where the council is, these have to be really robustly challenged and identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, that is the main reason for having a performance risk and budget board. So I appreciate that's an internal board, it's not a public meeting, but that ability to challenge and challenge hard is exactly where that sits. And if you have particular concerns, bring them to me, please, because I chair that board. And the more my colleagues, that's Councillor Bill Revans as leader and Councillor Thea Butt-Phillip for transformation are also there, the more we carry with us concerns of members from right across the council, the better we can challenge, and hopefully then the more effective the board can be. Thank you.
That sounds like a fun meeting to sit in on, Liz, at some point. Sarah.
Just to come in on that point as well. So two things really. The first thing to say is on the strategic risk, just to come back to your original point, one of the things that we have done is we have split the in-year risk from the financial sustainability risk, and you will see that those are scored differently, just to kind of pick up Nicola's point around focusing on the 010 is the in-year risk. In terms of reporting and robust challenge and support in that space, within the approach to risk management, what you'll see is there is a table of the different boards that are involved in managing risk and the roles and responsibilities within that as well, which includes the role and responsibility of this committee in that space.
Yeah, Nikki's going to come back, and then I'm going to go to Lindy online because she's been very patient with me.
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm, I think that's a really key point you just made there, Sarah, around the fact that Org 10 is about in-year overspend. That is the lowest. Actually, the MTFP at the moment is still 25. It's still the maximum risk.
Okay, welcome, Lindy. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My question or questions relate to the document in Appendix 8A on page 163, our approach to risk management. So my first question there is that the document lacks a defined risk appetite and tolerance statement. The document does refer to line of tolerance that's mentioned in the scoring matrix, but there's no formal documented risk appetite statement. The second question is that the document is predominantly looking at threats and the international standards on risk management, ISO 31000, encourages equal focus on opportunities and risk positive decision making. The third point I wanted to make is that there's no process in the document describing the identification of emerging or systematic risks, for instance, climate, cyber, ESG, or external risk scanning. And it's an expectation in terms of the ISO standards that there is a process that would help with identifying emerging risks. Number 4 of 6 of my questions is there's no framework for measuring risk maturity or cultural alignment with risk strategy. It's an essential requirement of the international risk standards. There's limited risk culture development, and cultural embedding is referenced only via behaviors on e-learning. Question number 5 is that there's no KPIs for risk management. There's no defined key risk indicators or performance evaluation criteria. The last question is, or comment, is that the risks are outlined as strategic, tactical, and operational, but there's no description of the method for escalating from a service level project risk to a corporate strategic risk. So that process should just be mentioned in the document. Thank you, Chair.
All very good points, Lindy. Thank you for raising them. Sarah, do you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you. Really, really helpful insights and points there, and something which I want to take back to the team. One of the things I should have mentioned at the outset, and apologies, as part of the whole council restructure, we have created a new service within my directorate, which is called Assurance, Performance and Risk. We have a new head of service in post from the 1st of April, so still early days. That's Sarah Hawkins. She's head of Assurance, Performance and Risk, and she is building a team at the moment. This is brand new, so it'd be really, really good to feed those points back and build them into this framework, this approach, so that we're developing, we're constantly improving. Really want to pick up on the point around culture as well. So important. There are some basic elements around this approach to risk management and our approach to performance, which form part of actually how do we help our organisation in terms of becoming much more risk aware and actually building this into everyday work. So what I would really love to do is to take that back to the team, let them to work on this with Liz, and come back to you at the next meeting on all of those. If that works.
Yeah, that's fine. We would definitely like a written response to that, I think, at some point down the line. I've got Simon next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back on something you just said, Sarah, the assurance, performance and risk, I'm very, very pleased to see that's coming forward. I thought you mentioned you were reporting back on that at the next month's audit meeting. Is that going to be a regular monthly report, or are we going to be receiving those reports quarterly?
Sorry, what I was saying was to come back on Lindy's points at the next Audit Committee meeting.
Okay, in that case, can I ask the question again? Assurance, performance and risk, when will we be seeing reports on that piece of work?
So that is a new service area. So that brings together our performance staff, our risk staff, and our programme management office staff into one service team. So are you asking for a report from that service area?
Yes, I want to know when we are likely to see a report on the work that they do.
Okay.
Is that audit or scrutiny is the question?
Yes, good question.
Anyone want to give me some, Liz?
Thank you. I just wondered, Chair, whether it was possible to arrange for Lindy to have a meeting with Sarah Hawkins. I believe that Lindy has previously met with Pam Pursley, which was very helpful, but I think with Sarah newly in post, and because risk, I know, is one of Lindy's specialist knowledges, I think it would be hugely helpful to the whole council, not just the Audit Committee, if Lindy were able to spare some time to meet with Sarah.
We'll leave that to you to liaise with Lindy, if that's okay. But once again, Lindy, your expertise has been very helpful. Thank you. Any further questions on this report? Otherwise, I'm going to move on. No, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So moving on to item 10. No, item 9, sorry. We've got the counter fraud annual report. I'm going to push through this one and then we'll see where we are with respect to breaks, if everyone's all right with that. Is that okay? So we've got Alistair.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Alistair Woodland, Head of Internal Audit for Somerset Council. So the report in front of you is the annual counter fraud report for 24-25. So this outlines the work that we've undertaken as part of the counter fraud function for Somerset Council, or on behalf of Somerset Council. And just to clarify our role with Somerset Council, we are mainly there to undertake investigations, but we also pay for the CFAS service as well, and we're looking to roll that out to strengthen fraud prevention controls in some key areas. So you will see that information spread out through this report. Agenda page 222 on the executive summary just summarises the main areas of our work that we've undertaken this year, so you're aware of that. Most of our time has been spent around the reactive fraud investigations. As I say, that is the main part of our service that we provide to Somerset Council. Agenda page 223, I think it's an interesting area for members to look at, particularly as this committee has responsibility for oversight of the fraud strategy in the authority. I appreciate that the SIP for fraud and corruption tracker hasn't been undertaken recently, but it's still a useful insight to the main areas in terms of volume and value of where frauds are committed against local authorities. And you'll probably recognise that we are picking up a number of those areas in some of the preventative measures that we're looking to roll out and strengthen through CIFAS. But there is still further work to do in particularly some of those areas. And I know that the counter fraud officer at Somerset Council has been going through doing the corporate risk assessment, fraud risk assessment, that will also inform where some work will fall in terms of making sure those controls are robust to prevent, detect fraud. So moving down to agenda page 226, fraud detection and investigations. I thought it'd be worth putting some information in for you to see in terms of the volumes that are happening. So we do split out fraud referrals relating to revs, bends and housing, because they're kind of the big volume areas. So they are separated out. And as you can see, there's been a significant increase in 24-25 on the number of referrals that we've received. That might be down to better awareness from officers and members of the public that are referring stuff in for us to look into. And there is some ongoing investigation work in that area as well. Where those have been proven, appropriate actions being taken by the authority, whether it's removing people from the housing register or backdating single person discount. Agenda page 227 just gives an overview of the number of corporate frauds that are referred to. So these are often referred to us by officers, service directors, directors that might have come across some concerns in their area. And these are undertaken and investigated by us. In terms of the investigation process, as I say, it has to be evidence-based. And so there is a case of us going through and making sure that we're complying with the relevant legislation in the areas that we're looking into to make sure that it doesn't damage any future prosecutions that we might want to take or advise the authority to take. We also provide and manage the confidential reporting line on behalf of Somerset Council. So again, it's the bottom of agenda page 227. It gives the stats and figures relating to whistleblowing concerns that we've been received. I would point out the numbers on face value probably seem quite high, but I would say a substantial number of them do not amount to whistleblowing concerns, and we do direct them to the appropriate routes for those actions or concerns to be addressed through whatever needs to be, whether that's through the complaints process or another process that the authorities put in place for dealing with those. Just on counter fraud, because I know I had quite a few conversations with the previous Section 151 officer in this area, and as I said, we are looking to develop our counter fraud service for Somerset. In terms of that development, we'll probably be looking at doing more analytical work in terms of identification of potential fraud. So it will be looking around using other external data to pick up on those. The authority is also part of the National Fraud Initiative, which again, the counter fraud officer within Somerset Council undertakes that review, which can also identify frauds. But we will be looking to develop our offering. And I know it's a question that the Vice Chair of this committee has asked before in terms of quantifying values. So we will be looking at also quantifying values of the work that we've undertaken in terms of savings that have been identified through the identification of frauds. So it's a very short update report for you as you have oversight of counter fraud, but happy to take any questions you may have.
Members? Andy?
Mine's more just for clarity. The report pages, I go to 231, it says documents restricted, it goes to 239. So am I missing? It wasn't published in LPAP. Wasn't. That's what I couldn't, right. Is there anything I'm missing or anything that's, there is there? Okay.
minimal details. So she asked if I was free, and obviously I said I wasn't 100% sure because I've got work. And I think Kyle is on. So
Sorry, Beth, I think your microphone's on.
what his plans are. I asked.
Yeah, just to clarify for the benefit of the committee, Appendix 1 is a confidential report. It is the Counter Fraud Action Plan and actions for 25-26 the authority needs to do to strengthen its internal controls around counter fraud. It was a plan that was presented to this committee in March, and it's just an update on the progress being made against that. As I say, you will receive a full update on that, hopefully midway through this financial year, as well as an outcome at the end of this financial year on those actions being addressed.
Ben? Oh, so I'll go Ben first. And
Chair, do the committee just want a quick brief on progress against the action plan, even though it's not presented?
that will be helpful, Ben. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. So the key thing that Alistair's already mentioned that we have made progress on is the fraud risk assessment. So Beth, Counter Fraud Officer, has undertaken that, which encompasses council-wide risk, including in that is recommendation from Beth and in assigning those to named responsible officers. The bit to pick up off as a subsequent piece there is understanding what our risk appetite is against all those areas. A blanket approach I don't think can be applied. Some areas are more risky in terms of their impact or likelihood. So that's something that Beth's currently putting together now and we'll bring forward to Nikki and then probably PRB as well, in terms of we know we've got a zero tolerance strategy, but what is our risk appetite and how hard do we push mitigations? The bit that remains on there in terms of more work to be done that we need to focus on is that outward publication and awareness of things like sanctions and prosecutions. So how noisy as a council do we want to be that we are zero tolerant? This has happened, we don't accept it, and this is what we do. And that's one of the pieces that we need to formulate against that fraud action plan that we want to make progress on.
Thanks, Ben. Sue and then Liz, or did you want to come back in specifically, Liz?
Just the point about how zero tolerant we want to be, how noisy, I think was a word I heard. And I completely support that as a council, we need to lay down our markers and we need to lay them down really clearly because for too long, some councils have had some reputations. This is still a new council. It's a big council. We need to have a really, really clear marker and a clear reputation that we do not tolerate any form of fraud, and anything that is in any of those papers is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Sue?
Thank you, Chairman. I think according to my ModGov, it's page 227, but it's referring to Part 6 whistleblowing policy, or just whistleblowing in general. There is a paragraph in there before the table that the monitoring officer is responsible for reviewing the whistleblowing policy. And your comment is it was last done in February 2022 and it's now due for review. I just wanted to know, bearing in mind the seriousness of the issues, when is this programme to actually be done? Because it's fine saying it's due, but I do think we need to see some evidence of a date, progress, and when this work is going to be completed. Sorry, Scott, no, it's not Scott. So I think that would be very helpful in the context of what we're talking about.
Scott, will you be able to pick that one up with Alan for us if he's reviewing the policy?
Will do.
Please.
I'll take that away as an action.
Yep. Happy with that, Sue?
Yeah.
Mic's off, Chair.
Sorry. I think I would like to see a commitment and a definite timetable for doing in that, bearing in mind it's an important part of our policies.
Scott's going to capture that with the monitoring officer for us, okay, and report back. Right, any final questions on this one, Tim?
Thank you, Chair. It's just an issue of clarification, really following from what was being said about the fraud investigations. I am very worried about this uptick in cases. again, we've got an economic situation that may be driving that. But I think from what I'm hearing, that it wasn't previously been actioned consistently across all the old district areas. Would that be a fair summary? And this reflects one policy and one council? Thank you.
So yeah, so sometimes the increase isn't necessarily because there's been an increase in activity, but an increase in awareness. So would anyone like to give us any assurance on that?
Chair, what I would say is I think the more that we do around, if you think something's not right or you spot something, report it. And I think that awareness training that we're doing across the organisation is bringing it forward, that actually probably people are coming forward to report things that perhaps may not have been reported before. I can't really comment on the strength of the policies that were in the districts, because there would have been a different approach. But I think, you know, for us at the minute, it's a really good position to be in terms of actually, I wouldn't want to see those numbers go down if people felt that they couldn't report it. So I guess it's a balance around, we don't want fraud to occur, we have a zero policy, but actually we want people to be able to feel that they can report it and have the correct line to be able to do that.
Chair, could I just add the point that, of course, we're moving towards one piece of software for all the revs and bends for the whole of Somerset, which means then that all of our officers will be trained on that one piece of software, and they will be able to work across what were the former district areas, whereas we have been working on 4 separate pieces of software, one of them outsourced to Capita. So we do have another of our transformational improvements right ahead of us, with a huge amount of work going on this summer. Data migration has already started. There are quite a few people who are, you know, not getting a lot of sleep at times, because that data migration, as you'll understand, is incredibly important. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close this down now with 2 final questions, one from Simon and one from Sue.
Just wanted to know what the data migration was, what timescales are we actually looking at to get us onto that one same system, so that we can actually get a proper grip on this.
Okay, so all of the data will be migrated over to the new supplier NEC in September. But what won't have happened is that means that they're all on one platform, but that platform is not merging together until after we've done the next cycle. So it will be from effectively, I think they're looking at April, June from 26. Yeah, because you wouldn't want to risk doing that. It's too high risk to try doing that merge. No. Thank you.
Sue?
Thank you, Chairman. It's just clarification, because former Mendit, their revs and bends work was carried out, and business rates, lots of other things, were outsourced to Capita. Has that contract now come to an end, so they will be part of this one programme?
Yes, I can confirm we're bringing the Capita contract in-house, and it will be part of one contract with the supplier, but it will all be done in-house. It won't be outsourced.
Okay, and following on from that, is that because the Capita contract has come to its natural end, or are we having to pay to exit?
No, it's come to its natural end, and some of the parties who were in that contract have decided to remain in that contract and taken a new contract forward, but we decided to exit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So I'm going to move on now. I'd like to take a short break, if I can. If we could come back by 10, let's say 5 to, and then we'll crack on with the rest of the agenda straight through. Is that okay? Yes, we're going to take a 20-minute break. There is cake available. Use blues, freshen up, and then we'll come in for the last few substantive items. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Right, everybody, we can come back to order, please. So I'm going to move on to item 10, which is the internal audit report progress report. So I'll hand over to Alistair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is your regular update report on the internal audit plan progress for 24-25. There are a couple of changes to the audit plan that were made late in the year in March, and I'll talk you through those when I get to that item on the page. But firstly, if you turn to the page on the supplementary pack, which is page 8, our page 1, this gives an overview of where we are with the internal audit plan. A couple of things that I'll draw your attention to on here. There has been some improvement during 24-25 with the implementation of internal audit recommendations. Those are highlighted bottom box there through the recommendation tracking. I do expect, as now the organisation has a more stable structure moving forward and hopefully internal controls and things embed, that we will see a reduction in internal audit actions as the control environment strengthens. Other things to highlight on here is obviously there's a number of reviews still in progress, and I know that independent member Lindy is obviously quite keen that we do wrap up our work as quick as possible. On the 13th that are outstanding, 3 relate to ongoing investigations. 1 is in relation to a grant assurance piece of work that we've had to pause because central government have changed the parameters for the sign-off requirement on that. So we are trying to double check whether we actually need to complete our work or not. And of the 9 assurance pieces of work, 2 have reached report stage since I wrote this report. So there are 7 currently in train. But as usual, we will work to ensure that all the work outstanding is complete. Our page 3, agenda page 10, that just gives a summary of our work against the strategic risks the organisation have in place. As you saw earlier on the agenda, those are changing. So we have been tracking the changes in strategic risks, and as those were approved last week, I believe, executive, we will be looking to make sure that our information is reflected and where our work is falling, how it aligns with those strategic risks. Areas that we want to look at in more detail will obviously be some of the control statements for how those risks are actually managed, as that's normally where some of our work will be falling. Supplementary page 12, our page 5, this highlights the changes to the audit plan. There's quite a few changes that have gone through. So a couple of grants, in addition to the one I've already mentioned, where it's been confirmed that we don't have to do mid-year sign-off. It can be done at the end of the grant period. So that work is aligned now for 26-27. The ones I would draw your attention to, because it's obviously high risk, is the high needs block deficit management plan. So we did have work in for Q4 on that, which we didn't start because people too are in doing a lot of work around that, and they've made a number of recommendations. So we are re-evaluating the risks in that area and where potentially our work will fall, but we have been requested to undertake some work that would be starting in June, that's in addition to the plan you approved in March around section 19 and ECHP. Moving on. So part of this report is obviously to highlight audits of where there's significant control weaknesses and the risks that it poses to the authority. So if I pick these up in turn, the first one there is identified on supplementary page 14 and 15 and 16, which highlights the work that was done on the Glasgow Town deal for the Life Factory project. So this was a piece of work that we were asked to do to look at the governance and financial controls that were in place. So again, for the benefit of the committee, to make sure you're all familiar with this project, I appreciate everyone's probably got a different level of knowledge. So the Life Factory project is part of the Town Steel Fund, and this is a fund that was put together by Levelling Up. We were encouraged to bid for the funding on this. So in this case, a business case or a series of business cases were put forward to MHCLG to approve the awarding grant funding. So those business cases included a strategic business case, a commercial business case, a management business case, an economic business case, and a financial business case. The financial business case included the breakdown or high-level costs that were put together by Mott MacDonald, so they are civil engineering consultants, of what this project would cost. And in the business case, that is stipulated at 5.7 million to deliver the Life Factory project. What the business case was seeking was 50% match funding for this. So it was seeking, actually in the business case, it was seeking around 3 million and it got 2.89 million. And the business case acknowledges there should be co-funding to support this that is yet to be identified where that will come from. So the business case does acknowledge that. As part of setting up this arrangement, Somerset Council put in place the grant agreement with the third parties that were delivering these projects. That's a legally binding agreement on how the grants should be delivered and how the controls around the grants should operate. So from our governance and control point of view and our work that we undertook, it was looking at the control mechanisms that are in place, particularly in the grant agreement, and ensuring that the grant is being fully complied with in terms of the controls. So the project was paused, as we know, back in late 2023 due to a discrepancy between the amount being claimed and the evidence that was being supporting against what was being claimed. The grant agreement is quite clear that supporting evidence should be provided against the amounts being claimed. In terms of the risk for Somerset Council here, Somerset Council is the accountable body, so it is at risk of any clawback from the grant from MHCLG. So that is something that the local taxpayer would pick up if MHCLG do implement clawback. So I say that's a big if. So in terms of the work that we were asked to do, it was during the summer of 24. There'd already been significant change in personnel on the project at this point. So for us, that presents challenges because obviously we're looking for, in compliance with the audit standards, evidence must be relevant, reliable and sufficient to help substantiate that controls are existing as they should do. So to highlight some of the key weaknesses identified looking through this piece of work, and I understand all members of the committee have received the full report, so I won't go through each of them, but just to highlight some of the key areas. So the project obviously commenced without the match funding in place, but there was an obligation to ensure that that match funding was sourced. And that is also identified in one of the schedules in the grant agreement of 2.89 million co-funding to be sourced. We haven't seen any further detailed costed plans other than the high-level Mont MacDonald breakdown for the project. So something we would expect as part of good governance and good financial control is what is your plan, financial plan of how you're going to deliver it, how it's broken down for each stage and how actual payments coming in and matching back to that. Because as you know, on any project, there can be a series of variations as actual costs can exceed or be under what was originally estimated. In terms of other areas, risk management is an area that could have been strengthened on this project, particularly with the information that was being highlighted. And we've also got some concerns just around the overall governance and oversight on this project at various levels that should have been in place. So moving on to the other items that are in our report. So I know there's been a lot of conversation in this committee already about cybersecurity. So we have done a piece of work in 24-25 around network boundary defences. And as you can see, there are some concerns that we had in this area. I would draw your attention to the summary on agenda page 17, as that highlights the award that we gave for this audit and why it's not a higher risk from a corporate point of view, because there are a number of other mitigating controls that the authority has in place to reduce the risk around some of the outdated devices that are in place. Agenda page 18, Highways Bridges Contract Limited Assurance. So this follows on from the Highways contract work we did and I presented earlier in March. This highlights some control weaknesses again around the performance framework that's in place to ensure the contract are delivering as they should do. You will notice also that some of the interim payments were not adequately supported by evidence that justifies the award of the payment. So again, there's some strengthening around financial controls that could be put in place there. I won't go through the follow-up work in detail. These are highlighted on agenda page 20, 21 and 22, but it does show that a number of audit recommendations and actions have been completed and the risks in those areas have been reduced. Just to give you a brief update on some of the recommendation tracking that's been going through. So on agenda pages 33 to the end of the report highlights all the outstanding priority 1 actions relating to this authority. There is an update to provide you that I've had since writing this report, which is around the Highways Contract Management Review. And this update is highlighting that management have now got the operational KPIs in place and they are being reported and will be reported at the June board. So there will be effective performance monitoring to ensure that contract is delivering as expected, as that was one of the key weaknesses around that audit, that the performance framework wasn't in place. I'm sure there's lots of questions that members may have, so I'm happy to hand over to members for questions.
So I'm going to get Nicola to come in first before I open the floor up to members. So Nicola.
Thank you, Alistair. Sorry, I just wanted a point of clarification. In your opening statement with the Life Factory project, you said that Somerset Council did the grant agreements with the projects. If my memory is correct, was actually Mendip District Council.
Yeah, for point of clarification, so the original grant agreement was signed in March 2023 by Mendip, but as Mendip have obviously ceased to exist, that is now assumed and handed over to Somerset Council. Yeah.
Alistair, before I open up to everyone else, the priority 1 actions in the report, most of these seem to be for Glastonbury, the Glastonbury Town Deal Board, or the Red Brick Building Board, etc. So I know that they've appeared on our audit, the map of outstanding actions. Is that fair to have them on the Somerset Council list of outstanding actions if most of them are for third-party bodies?
From a risk point of view, the risk lies with Somerset Council as the accountable body. And in terms of our audit remit, we can't make third parties implement audit recommendations, which is why our recommendations will always be aimed at officers within Somerset Council.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify. So, right, I'm opening up then. So I've got Sue and then Simon. Oh, no, it's not Simon. Okay, over to you, Sue. Lindy online and then Tim.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Nicola, because when I saw that this had finally been published in a sliced and diced fashion into another report, I was concerned we were not being particularly transparent in how we had published a report. Nicola, to her enormous credit, and I give her thanks for it, promptly sent me a copy of the report and then has subsequently gone on to say, well, this is available to councillors, but not for publication per se. So it stayed with me. And I'm very pleased that Nicola has indeed released the entire report, the 2 pages, the 5-page and the 12-page, to members of this audit committee. Frankly, there's an awful lot to unpack here. And in fact, we mustn't forget that with the Red Brick project, somebody actually died. They came to full council 2 months ago to say that due to the financial hardship that endured because of the pausing and the stress it had put on his wife, she had taken her own life. So we must not forget that in how we deal with this. It really is, where do you start to unpick it? How did this organisation get selected in the first place? Who assessed its level of competence and that it could actually work to what is a legally binding agreement? And as a result of all this, the council could well be on the hook for having to repay MHCLG the funding because we haven't complained. To be honest, I really do feel that this item should have come as a standalone item. So members have had time to mark, learn, inwardly digest the content, and we could have a full and frank discussion on this. And in terms of where we go from here, are you on schedule to actually carry out those priority actions? I see you've got a timeline of August. Is that going to be enough? It's also worth noting that the Red Brick building itself as a company was registered as a public, it was registered through the FCA as a community benefit society. So its last set of accounts recorded with that society was the financial year ending 2023. Now, if you read the FCA, they actually don't like you producing your accounts too late. I think they give you 7 months, or else you're open to being fined or facing some sanction from them. So, and those accounts, by the way, actually were signed off January 2024. We haven't seen a set of accounts for year ending 2024, and we're now into May 2025. So that has got to be a red light. And when you look at the 2023 accounts, it paints a totally different picture to what we're seeing, not just through the publicly available information, but through what is contained in these reports. So I think there is a red light there. The public minutes of the board meeting, which was to ensure that people were fully informed with what was going on, they haven't been publicised since November 2023. Councillor Lation also said in that final set of minutes that she was pushing to get the audit to the December 2023 Audit Commission. Sorry, to the Audit Committee. 5 months on, it's finally arrived. So what has caused the delay and what are the workers going to do? And are we actually going to have a close and careful look at those other projects which were supposed to be match funded in some form or other, but at different levels of degree? And only just last week, I understand that a non-key decision was made on another project, I think it's the Richard Roberts initiative, and that was going to be fully funded. So I'm not quite sure how all this works. I really do feel.
Have you got much more? Because
No.
what I want to do is to make sure I get answers to all of your questions. Okay, quite a
that's
lot,
absolutely fine.
Quite
My final one.
Quite a lot of content in there. I don't want to miss anything.
The final one is, are we going to do a deep dive into the rest of the town deal as a whole? The deadline for this is March 2026. Are those projects going to be delivered by then? Is the match funding secure and available for then? Because there is also there's a massive risk to us reputationally. There is also a risk that after March 2026, you could have a risk that if the match funding hasn't been secured, you could have a lot of half-built projects. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So I'm just trying to think in which order it's best to answer your questions. So Nicola, did you want to come in first on some of it?
I think the important thing to remember is this is around whether sound governance arrangements and financial controls were in place. We have publicly said there's further work that's being undertaken, and that is being undertaken by SWAP Internal Audit Services, along with the council. We're very much involved in this. It's top of our agenda. The chief exec is involved and is in liaison with members and external bodies on this. So I think in terms of, are we going to meet deadlines and are we going to, how fast we're pushing at this? I think it's, I can provide assurance. We are looking at it. It's top of our top priority. In terms of that assurance piece around other projects within the town deal, any town deal funding requests that are going off to MHCLG for claims to be made are being checked by SWAP Internal Audit Services. So they've all been referred over off the back of this control weakness being identified. So Alistair and his team are looking at all of those as well to make sure that we have that assurance, and especially that I have that assurance as 151 to sign off any claims going in, that they are correct and in line with the grant agreement. So Alistair's team are doing that. And we are in discussions with MHCLG around the fact that we have missed some return deadlines going back into them, but they are comfortable with the approach that we're taking and are being very good in waiting for that information to come in. So I can't remember what the other questions were.
Okay, Alistair, is there anything that you want to pick up from Sue's questions?
Yeah, I think just to pick up on the timing of it as well, in terms of the original audit, you've all seen the audit report and the table at the end in terms of trying to match the funding up. One of the things that's still not resolved and wasn't resolved during that audit is making sure all the evidence that backs up the claims to date is available. Now, that is a separate piece of work that's being picked up through the contractor piece of work. So it was recognised that it'd be best to issue that report, but do it as a separate piece of work and trying to reconcile everything.
Just a supplementary, one of the things I did after the last council meeting was to go back and read those public minutes. And it is clear from those board minutes that there were issues was concerned. I can't give you the precise page and month of the minutes, but there were concerns being registered in there about lack of evidence of match funding being secured or attempts to do that. There was also concern about progress as well. There was quite a lot of red flags being picked up that would have been picked up. And I'm just curious to know why did the accountable body act on them, and also what actions the board itself took?
Liz, did you want to answer any of that?
I just think it's only fair that I make it clear that the Town Deal Board is an advisory board. So it doesn't hold responsibility for any of the finances of the town deal. That is the same in Bridgewater as it is in Glastonbury and all the other 99 towns around the country.
I think I'm right in saying that when this funding originally came out, there was quite an emphasis on devolving this money to communities as quickly as possible. Was that correct? And that actually from central government, the edict was essentially to get the money out as quickly as possible. So therefore, some of these risks were heightened by the sort of strings that were attached with the money in the first place. Am I correct in saying that? I don't know who's answering that question.
That's the COVID accelerator. There was two types of funding.
Yeah, and I think you are correct in terms of they want the money spent in the communities and they're very keen for the projects to be delivered. That's the discussions we've had with them so far in terms of, I know there was a question raised at council yesterday about have we got assurance that the council doesn't have to pay the money back or who's liable. We don't have that assurance at the moment. We are in discussion with MHCLG about the delivery of the project. They want the project delivered. So they're very keen for us to explore options at the minute about how and if we can deliver that project. But I am in regular communication with them.
Okay. So are you satisfied that you've had enough response to the questions you laid out? I know you were asking questions about the lack of availability of accounts. Yeah. Certainly, as the accountant sat to my left has reminded me, it's 9 months and a day from year end to get the accounts published. So often, I don't think my company's accounts for 24 are published yet because of that timeline.
No, but I think this is something that the FCA are insisting on. That's not my specification. That is what's in the FCA. So I think it's probably something you take up with the FCA, quite honestly, as to how they do or don't ask for information. But the point is we're now May 2025 and the last set of published accounts is year end March 2023. And as we know, from the timelines, from the information that's presented in front of us, a hell of a lot has happened and we need to catch up. And if you look at those 2023 accounts, they give you a totally different picture to what is being generated by this report, these two reports that are in front of us.
Thank you. So who is next on my list of questions? Is it Susanna? Yeah, Susanna?
I don't know if I'm next, but anyway. I mean, there's so much to say. I just honestly don't know where to start. But I do think that Sue's point about we really need a separate meeting just to look properly at this is a really valid point and a request. And I'd really like to have an answer as to whether that is possible or not. I think for Liz's response to Sue, which is the Town Deal Board is an advisory board, surely as an advisory board, they should have advised us that there were problems with this particular project. And I just don't understand how all of this has been allowed to happen. I really don't. And I think there's a massive, in my mind, conflict of interest when the husband of the chair of the board
but if we're going to talk about specific people, I'm just going to stop. I am going to stop you
okay,
there.
Then I think we need to look at, I won't talk about a specific person, I think we need to look at the link between the chair of the board and the person whose company was awarded this project and ask ourselves if perhaps that's the reason why the advisory board didn't advise us that there were problems.
I am going to stop you there because we potentially stray into territory which could be problematic for individuals and for the council from a legal perspective. So,
okay, but there has to be a point at which we are able to discuss this.
100%. I agree with you that there are definitely questions to be answered. There are definitely lessons to be learned. I think at this stage, it would be premature of us to point the finger at specific people.
Then could I also ask?
Scott, did you want to come in at that point?
Oh.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I mean, all members will be fully aware in terms of committee meetings that there are exempt information provisions, particularly about any debates referring to any individuals or where you can identify individuals. And therefore officers would advise, should any of the discussions or debates start moving into those territories, that you pass a resolution to exclude the press and public if those are some areas that you feel are pertinent to your debate. But we would be advising for any of those types of debates to be done in private session and not in public.
Liz, is this specifically on this point?
It is, Chair. So the Register of Conflicts of Interest is published on the Glastonbury Town Deal website. I just opened it up, and those conflicts of interest, including my own, are all very clearly laid out there. Every time that board meets, we have an agenda item that is updating anything on conflict of interest, and it has been kept up to date on the Town Deal website.
So if I could just respond to that, thank you very much for underlining that, Liz. So I come back to my original point, which was I don't understand as an advisory board why they didn't advise us that there were issues, major financial risks involved with this project. That's what I don't understand. And then a question to Nicola is, do we have a view already, or have MHCLG given us their view of the situation so far? And really, I don't know, I'm hoping you've got an answer to this. Do we know when the further works on this audit are going to be completed? Because at the end of the day, there are real people whose businesses are going bankrupt because they've been unpaid for 16 months. And, you know, I asked to sit on the Town Deal as soon as I became a councillor for Glastonbury. I wasn't allowed to. I've asked repeatedly to be included in meetings, to be updated if I wasn't allowed to be included in meetings. I've emailed people, even sitting in this room, begging them to even respond to my email, even if they can't give me the answer to my question. I don't even get a response. So I feel it's really difficult for me in that community when I'm being asked questions and I have no answers to give anyone.
So I was under the impression that the chief executive had invited the local members to a briefing. Was that not the case?
I mean, given what Scott just said, I'm kind of reticent to respond to that, but I'll respond. And if you want to stop me, please stop me. So yes, I was invited. I had to email by return to say that the particular day that was on is the one and only day that I'm contracted to work in Bristol. So I couldn't attend. Could it be held on a different day, or could I send someone in my place? And the answer on both counts was no. As I understand it, I've had a few emails recently, but I actually found out yesterday that meeting didn't even take place. So I don't know, but and I had prior to that asked for feedback to that meeting, and all I ever got was basically the press release, which had already been released. Thank you.
Liz, did you want to respond?
I'd like to say that I'd like to thank the Chief Executive for arranging all of the briefings before the statement went out and before these audit papers were published. And he did arrange to do a specific briefing for the 2 Glastonbury councillors. It's not up to me. I'm not one of them. He also did a briefing for the Town Deal board. He also did an in-person briefing with the Red Brick board. And I just want to go back to the projects and monitoring of the projects through the advisory body, the Town Deal board, because there is a civil servant attends that board in attendance. So the civil servant who has responsibility for the town deals across the country, they divide them up amongst a number of civil servants. So we have seen 2 or 3 changes over the period, because don't forget this started December 19 when the letter arrived at Mendip District Council. To be quite honest, unexpected. The letter inviting Mendip for Glastonbury to become one of the Town Deal projects. And every time the board meets, we have a full report from the programme manager, and projects are identified as projects or projects of concern or projects of serious concern. The civil servants have access to all of those reports every time the board meets, in advance of the board.
Can I just respond? I'd also like to thank Duncan for setting up those meetings. However, as I explained, I could not attend, and I only discovered yesterday that the other member for Glastonbury did not attend. Ergo, the meeting couldn't have happened. I mean, I could be mistaken, but it seems to me the meeting didn't happen. So that's my response to the chair's question.
Yeah, no, that's fine, and I appreciate that. You know, we all have other commitments that sometimes can't be moved. It wasn't a criticism. I just wanted to check if you'd had the opportunity to speak to the chief executive. Sue.
Yes, it's in response to Liz.
Hang on, sorry, just 1 second.
Sorry. Sorry, I just wanted to answer Councillor Hart's question because she directed a question at me directly in regards to MHCLG. So I think I'd already alluded to the fact we are in discussions with them. They received all of the information that went out in the public domain on last Thursday, that we have a follow-up meeting next week. Their initial response was they wanted us to explore options to be able to see whatever the project could still continue to be delivered on site. I think that we will be saying to them next week that we, the view of those options and also around the position in terms of the feedback that's been had from Audit Committee. I think so. We are being transparent in our conversation, but they haven't confirmed either way as yet. They want further information.
I mean, could I just very briefly come back on that, please?
I've got 2 people with hands up online who I'm going to bring into the debate after
but just to very quickly say, in terms of exploring options, I'd like to give my own feeling and the feeling of the people that I represent, which is it would be really lovely if a roof could be got onto that building, because otherwise the money that's already been spent, and we're talking about millions of pounds, is going to rot, and it needs to happen. It needs to have already happened. It needs to happen this summer. Any builder will tell you.
So questions over individual projects and the spending of money need to be directed to the red brick building. We have no control over the spending of any money or any direct contractual relationship.
I just think that's a really important point to give over to in terms of exploring options.
We absolutely take the point. And I understand the importance of this project for Glastonbury. However, Somerset Council has no direct contractual relationships. We can't authorise the direct spending of any money on this project. So, right, I've got a little queue. So I've got Gwyl, I've got Lindy, and I've got Mandy. So Gwyl would like to go. Oh, and Ros as well. Oh, and Simon. Oh, okay. Right. Hang on a second. We've got a long list of people, and I've been very bad at bringing the people who are online in first. So I'm going to bring Lindy in first, and then Mandy. I'll come to Gwyl, Steve, Tim, Simon, and then Ros. We'll go around in a circle. Yeah, make it easy. Lindy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to labour the point further. I've had my questions written down and sent an email about the Red Brick project. So I'm looking forward to amended report with additional procedures being performed and when there's what the outcome of the project is, but just to also say big red lights, and I have confidence in SWAP to do the necessary procedures to make sure that there was indeed value for money on that amount spent by council. All right, then I've got a question on the network boundary defences audit. I just wanted to know, why was the firmware for the internal firewall not the latest version? And then on the highway bridges contracts, I understand that there was mention made about not enough capacity, but I wanted to know that, are there at least at the end of a project a proper site visit, and are robust inspections being performed with photos, sign-offs, etc.? And does Somerset Council then keep a retention on these projects? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Very specific questions. Over to Alistair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the questions. In terms of the firmware on network boundaries, obviously with going through LGR and the various IT infrastructure being brought together, there are legacy devices that are out there that haven't been updated or replaced yet. So that's the best explanation I can give you at the moment. If that's insufficient, I'm happy to liaise with the service and get something more detailed for you. In terms of the highways bridges contract, on this one, no, site inspections aren't always undertaken. I think that's probably part of the weakness in the control framework. But likewise, to give you a full answer, I'd rather speak to the service, if that's okay, and share the response with the entire committee.
Thank you, Alistair. So next on my list is Mandy. Thanks for being patient, Mandy. Good morning and welcome, or good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. I just got a little piece to read out. There's some questions at the end of it, if I may. So it'll only take a couple of minutes. Hopefully you can indulge me. So the report tells us, and I'm talking about the Life Factory, that potential for reputational damage was overlooked. 2023 risks around construction costs were rising rapidly. Actually, I've looked back at the indices and they actually rose steadily from 2020. Grant payments were not processed in line with grant funding agreement. Claims submitted were not timely and often missing. No evidence of a delivery plan. Lack of assurances that there was a competent and qualified project team in place. No match funding in place. There are so many red flags that should have been flying from day one, and thereby lies my concerns. So this council has released grant monies without any match funding being in place. This meant the completion of the project was not viable from day one. From day one, there's been no plan, no match funding, and inaccuracy in the risk monitoring. The auditors say, and I quote, that the system of governance, risk management and control is inadequate to effectively manage risks to the achievement of the objectives. Somerset Council is the accountable body for Glastonbury Town Deal and in turn the Life Factory project. This means that Somerset Council is responsible for ensuring proper use of the town fund grant from government, and those are the words used from the response to Jonathan Wilkins to his full council question. And to ensure proper use and value for money, there must be a delivery plan, evidence of viability and a process of procurement. I have a huge amount of concerns that a lot of these issues that have been raised, and certainly issues in the action plan, are actually bread and butter, really basic issues. To not have our risk register up to date for all of our operations across the council is a huge concern to me. There's no point having a risk register if it's not monitored and kept up to date, and I think that's a major issue for this committee to consider and look into. Also, that there was not a competent and qualified project team in place to oversee the project. This is an absolute basic premise of any project that this council should be looking at. And I'm quite astounded and amazed that this is here as a remediation action. This should be business as normal. So my questions are, should a grant agreement have been awarded to the red brick building without either a robust financial delivery plan or assurance that there was a competent and qualified project team in place? Question 2, should any grant funding have been released against claims made without the match funding being in place, given completion of the project was not viable without it? Question 3, whilst I thank the audit team for their work, the issues that they've raised, there are many shortfalls in our controls and checks, our risk management and monitoring as a responsible body. And there is a risk around potential clawback of the grant that's in the report. So my question to the audit committee is, moving forward, what work can the audit committee do to avoid a similar situation ever arising again? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mandy, for your questions. So, Nicola, do you want to start answering those?
I think I'll answer them in block, and then Mandy can come back if she feels I haven't answered it. But I think from our perspective, we need to look at this report is about identifying the failings in governance and systems and procedures. And it's about then we need to bring it back in terms of how we've strengthened all of that and what the impact of this has been not just that everyone knows about the risk with the funding having gone out, but I think there's the wider implications which the Audit Committee have recognised in terms of if we have this with one specific project, is it a much wider issue, which is hence why we put it out, the remaining out to swap internal audit to have a look at. But I think the finance team will work closely with the economic development team to do a response to the strengths and action that's been taken to address all of this and bring it back to the Audit Committee. But I would like the audit work of swap to be concluded on this one before we bring that back. And I know a question has previously been posed around the timeline on that, and we're kind of in Alistair's hands slightly there in terms of how quickly they can conclude their work.
Thank you very much. I would just leave the committee with a comment that I think, given what we've read and what is in this report, Somerset Council has had a large part to play in the project. I really hope that moving forward we can support those local business, find some way to do that, so that we don't see anybody who has worked on the project to the detriment of themselves, their families or their businesses. And I think, again, for Audit Committee, there is a large piece of work, a lot of the things that we've been auditing, which includes risk, you know, an absolute advocate for risk. Things have not worked here. So a lot of the risks we are reading, my concern is, if this isn't accurate, how much else could potentially be accurate? And I welcome that work, Nicola, and I look forward to hearing more at future meetings. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me.
No, you're always welcome, Andy. No problem, thank you. So I'm going to Gwyl next, and then I've got Steve.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must make a confession. This is the first time I've sort of homed in detail on this. I don't remember seeing the papers with the original thing, so I must have missed them in the interim, and Scott sent something out this morning, so I'm very grateful to Alistair for his explanation. I've been listening to the debate, and there are one or two things that occurred to me here. Firstly, I think I do wonder where the model for distributing money in this way is particularly good, because it seems to be channeling through various bodies with tripwires at every stage. And I think it would be useful for someone to analyse whether this is a good way of distributing money, because it comes into the council. The council is desperate, I would think, to say, oh, well, let's get the money out there. And so there is a risk. There must be a substantial risk that the recipient has, well, the due diligence hasn't been done. And we've heard certainly reference to that. I also been interested to hear that the company is actually a community benefit society. Now, I have some experience in community benefit society. I was a member of one. And one of the things that really triggered me was questions over governance within it, and also questions of declarations of interest within it, neither of which I think in the one I was talking about I was particularly convinced with, and I don't think I was popular for raising them anyway, that's by the by. So as a result of that, I did actually take the time to go through the standard CBS documents that sets them up, and they're quite interesting actually, because there are lots of checks and balances for members to get involved if they're that interested. But one of the interesting things is it gives you, at the annual meeting, you have the option of what kind of audit you want. You can actually have a very light touch audit if you want, or you can go for a full audit. And looking at this company's last accounts, it said it went for a full professional audit of the accounts that came out in 2020 for 22-23. Is that right? The last set. So but I haven't been able to track down in the time available a copy of that audit report. And I think it would make quite interesting reading, because clearly the company has been cleared, and according to the papers here, had assets at the end of the financial year of 1.9 million and a turnover of 365.
Well, I think that means accounting audit rather than or our type of audit. So
yes, that's fair enough. It would be a financial audit, but I mean, you would expect well, I don't know. I'm not an auditor. I've done a little bit of auditing, but I would have expected the auditor to form a view. I don't know. Am I being unfair to auditors? Do they just do what they're told, or oh God, I'm sorry, I'm treading on very dangerous. Well, okay, I would like an explanation of whether the audit that they paid for should have flagged up some of this stuff. And
is that an internal document?
Well, normally it's an internal, you don't, small businesses, if you're a small company, you don't really need an audit. Normally what happens is the internal accounts will perform their profit loss balance sheet, source application fund statement, all that sort of stuff, and that could then be sent, like, say, to Companies House or whatever. But you can actually have a proper audit where they're going through and do like nominal checks and check that everything's balancing up and whatever. That's a more in-depth audit. I think that's what they've gone for. They've gone for a more in-depth audit. It doesn't go to, it's not a public document, I don't think.
Yeah, it says a full professional audit here, which is presumably employing a third party to come in and have a route around.
I suspect I suspect that the issue here is whether things such as the financial due diligence on bidders was robust enough, because if those checks and balances weren't required as part of the grant fund application or process, then you may never look at those things, and therefore they'd never be picked up, Will. So I don't know whether the rules on the grant funding were set by central government or whether that's a Somerset Council thing. I'm in the dark on that at the moment. Liz, do you want to enlighten me?
Chair, I can enlighten you on one point, which was that the town deals were unusual as funding mechanism from government, because each project was allowed to claim retrospectively, which is what you normally get on a project. You have to be able to cover your own cash flow, but they also allowed at the same time a forward claim, so that then gave a lot more work at the next claim because they all had to be matched up. So it's only worth mentioning because that is something that was specific to town deals and wasn't, I don't believe, seen anywhere else in levelling up funds.
And that would then create some of the problem and the momentum behind the project, which Councillor Osborne was talking about in terms of the monies which are paid out, coming in advance of the expenditure within the funded body.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I take that. I mean, I'll go back to my experience of audit, which is as a parish clerk, when I used to go to a gentleman down the road who would audit our accounts. Every payment we made was sent to him, and he would work out whether it had been properly made, whether it was referred back to in the minutes, things like that. That's the kind of audit I was thinking about, because the implication is here that payments have been made without necessarily having proper quotations or estimates, or the things just got away. And I would have thought a full professional audit would have been able to understand how the money comes in and how the money goes out and what it goes out for. And we haven't had a set of accounts since this one.
So, as I say, I'm not clear on which type of audit they were referring to and whether that is part of the grant funding requirements for Somerset Council to audit that in order to disperse the money.
This leads into my sort of final point, if you like. The first point I made was about the adequacy of the funding arrangement per se, so routing it from central government through us, then on to a third party, and how that clearly has its issues, shall we say. But the interesting thing that really struck me is that we're on the hook for the money, for potential clawback, but we have no contractual relationship, I don't think, with the company that's delivering it, that's got the money, or that seems to be the way. And I'm just wondering how, from a legal perspective, that actually works, because if can they claim us? If we're charged with passing on money, we would have to be charged with incompetence. But I don't. These are areas of law I don't know anything about. So it just seems a bit strange that we're on the hook for all this.
The only people that have a contractual relationship with suppliers are the Red Brick Building. We have no contractual relationship with them. Therefore, we cannot pay them because we have no contracts with them.
Do you have a grant agreement?
We have a grant agreement in place with Red Brick. Yeah.
But no, the point is that I think Alistair said that the government could claw back from us if the money wasn't properly spent or they were unconvinced about how it was going, which penalises us for something that, notwithstanding the checks and balances we should have undertaken perhaps, is something completely out of our control. And I just wondered how legally that works, because we seem to be in a hole and nobody's giving us a ladder here.
Quite. Right. So who's next, Steve or Tim? I don't mind, you can fight it out between the two of you.
What I'll do is I have a question about net boundary defences. To avoid bouncing between topics, if you come back to me once you've exhausted the red brick building.
That's fine, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. With the red brick building, I understand the aspiration is to complete the project. I have to say, with a little bit of local knowledge, I think that is questionable. I don't think there's a large chance of that happening. It may do. I think that if that is the case, then we are on the hook to repay that grant. My question is, in the case of criminality by any of the other organisations...
Tim, I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop you there. That's not appropriate for us to discuss. If we have concerns over any potential inappropriate...
I had pre-cleared this with an officer.
Hang on a second. If you have concerns over any potential inappropriate behaviour, the correct route is to inform SWAP, and SWAP can pick that up for you. Okay. If you want to take this offline for a second, we can take a view with Scott now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me 2 minutes. We will confer with officers. Okay, so I will take it under advisement. Give me 2 minutes. We'll come back. Okay. Right, everyone. We're going to come back to order.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to request that we have a private session on this once the audit is concluded. Thank you, Chair.
That's fine. I think we can agree to that private session as per the earlier requests from Councillor Osborne for the same. So once the audit's work is all complete, then we will have a private session for audit members to discuss this matter. Okay. And we know, and it's all right. You don't have to go, Andrew. We're not going into private session at this stage unless the debate requires it. Right, who's next? Simon Carswell, and then I've got Ros, who's been very patient with me.
Thank you, Chair. I've been very patient as well. Just a couple of points. I have got a number of questions, but a couple of points was that originally there were numerous applications for projects for the Glastonbury Town deal, probably in the 20s, I'm not sure, Liz, but there were a lot. And I think that was narrowed down to about 12. There were many rejected, and that 12 eventually went down to 10. And of those 10, there is one that's got big issues, but the other 9 on the whole are progressing well, and some have been completed. Tor Leisure, the Abbey Piazza. Having said that, I do agree with a lot of what Mandy, Councillor Chilcott said. It does interest me that the audit report from SWAP goes on about actions to be done, but they're all a bit late, I'm afraid. They're all a bit horse and bolted, sort of, because the money's gone already, and those should have been done before. I do wonder why insurance details weren't obtained prior to any works being carried out. And was any match funding ever applied for? I don't know. Are there any steps that have been taken to recover any monies from the red brick? Do we have any basis to do that? And finally, finally, what I'm concerned is the state of the building now. I'd hate for more money to be given to the red brick building, but is there any way that Somerset Council could use some of that remaining funds, approximately 500,000, just to make the building safe?
I think we'll have to give you written answers to those questions, Simon. We'll come back to you at a later date.
Just one other quick thing. I think there was an issue really when control of the project was handed over from Mendip to Somerset. And I do feel that perhaps some key staff were lost at that time who knew about the deal. And also perhaps remaining staff weren't supported as much as they should have been.
I think there are definitely fair issues around the transition and local government reorganisation that hopefully were one-offs that aren't an ongoing risk to the council, but absolutely would have played a part in this whole situation. Ros.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to touch on 2 or 3 things. One is we have the ongoing work with SWOT, and I think we've got to be very careful not to undermine that, because we want to have as much and full information when things are discussed going forward. I'm sure as a learning council we will have a formal review with lessons learned. And I think when we do that, I think there are 2 or 3 things which we really must take into account. One was how Glastonbury Town Deal came about. It's 101 towns across the country, many of them chosen for, let's say, less than obvious reasons, and were under pressure to deliver. The setup, which Councillor Nation referred to, is, I think, quite unique. And it was very much that it was not just about handing over money retrospectively against invoices. There was real pressure from government to actually forward monies to the community organisations. And it was recognised, and I talk not just about Glastonbury, but across the country, that many of the town deals recognised there was risk there. And so why do you think that the government centrally put a civil servant onto an advisory board? I can't think of many other organisations or dealings with government where the civil servants nationally attended a board every single time there was a standing invitation, they were a member of the board. And I speak as being part of Mendip at the time. There was real pressure to be arm's reach in many respects. All the normal ways you would do things around a grant application, of which we know the previous government spent a lot of time and effort giving local government. You had to bid for a grant, you then finally got the grant, and then you had to go through a number of processes. But none of them, whether I talk about the High Street Fund or any of the other ones, have this particular financial setup. And it coincided, unfortunately, as somebody alluded to, the change in government, locally, LGR, and all the implications. So I do think that we've got a number of unique circumstances sitting there. And so when we go to do some lessons learned, I would suggest that we just look at the bigger picture, because I know from talking to other councils who have town deal monies that the arrangements are quite unique, and the emphasis from central government and from the civil servants again added to the situation. I'll say, I think no more. I think it needs to be looked at, but I don't want it to be looked at as this is a Glastonbury problem or this is a Somerset problem. This is actually a much bigger problem, and is one of those things we need to learn lessons from. Thank you.
Thank you, Ros. Susanna?
Really sorry, but for me, it's lovely to learn lessons, but at this stage, it's not about learning lessons. It's about getting the local contractors paid and saving that building by trying to find 50 grand to put a roof on it. That's what it's about. That's where we need to focus. Maybe I'm wrong.
Once again, the only people that can pay local contractors are Red Brick.
But we need to take less than 16 months to not complete an audit in order to be able to either tell give Red Brick the money.
So as you can see from the audit, there is absolutely no way this authority can legally pay out any more money to Red Brick based on the governance deficiencies that have been highlighted. That would be, I dare say, unlawful, but it would be ultra vires, certainly. So we are not in a position to be able to rectify those governance issues because they're not our issues.
You know, ultimately, I think we need to work more at pace than we have been able to. And we need to try and find at least answers, if not funding, to pay these people and try to save the millions already spent.
The roadblock in paying contractors is not Somerset Council and the audit, the delays in the audit that have happened. Just to be clear, the only authority that has the ability to pay contractors is Red Brick.
Yeah, but the Red Brick get the money from the government via Somerset Council.
Which we can only disperse in compliance with the legal grant funding agreement, which we cannot comply with because, as the report lays out, there are a number of deficiencies which mean that we can not disperse any further funds at this stage.
I can see there are. However, it's just taken a really long time, a really, really, really long time to still not have an answer to give people.
So it's not our answer to give.
Surely that's the whole point of the audit, so that we can give the answer.
No, it's for Red Brick to pay the contractors. It's for us to learn lessons in terms of the deficiencies in the internal control environment for Somerset Council.
But Red Brick get the money via us from the government.
It's not our money. We are holding the ring on the money for the
complete process.
Yeah, of MHCLG. We are not in a position to disperse the monies other than in accordance with the grant funding agreement from central government.
Because I think, Suzanne, you said something incorrect just a moment ago.
Okay.
You said you didn't want the audit to be completed, and I think actually we do need to get the audit.
No,
completed.
I never said I didn't want the audit.
Well,
I said
okay.
it still is not completed.
Sorry, then I misheard you because I didn't think that's what you meant. That's why I brought it up.
No, it definitely
But
needs to be
in order,
completed.
my understanding, and I'm prepared to
pace.
be corrected if I'm wrong, is that Somerset Council might hold the funding, but we cannot release any money until the prescribed steps have been taken, i.e. with rearward funding. You produce an invoice that says we would like £5 for tea bags, please, or next month we have to pay in advance to get a delivery of daily milk and it's 85p a pint a day. So we have to pay 30 days worth of 80p or whatever the figure is. And that's without that paperwork and without that instruction and or request, we cannot release the funding. It's my understanding. Now, if I've got that wrong, I'm more than happy to come in.
So Nicola's going to come in at this point.
So you have got that correct. That in order for us to claim the money back from MHCLG, we would be required to provide a submission and have the evidence behind the claim being made.
Whether that's rearward or forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the frustrations with the time lag on this audit. It's a very complex audit and we don't hold all of the information to be able to complete some of the audits. So I think Alistair's team are doing their best to try and work with the Red Brick building to complete this audit. But I don't know if Alistair, you want to come in terms of the timeline. I think it might be helpful to give even if it is just an indication of when your team hope to have completed the work.
I think it's a good word, hope. You're quite right. The information we're after is not held by Somerset Council, it's held by the Red Brick building. There is quite a large discrepancy between the grant that's being paid out and the evidence that supports it. So at the moment, there's a significant value of unsubstantiated money that's being paid over. Now, as Nick has alluded to, we can't draw down more money from MHCLG on that project without having the evidence that supports the grants that have already been paid out to Red Brick building. And as I say, the issue is it's been quite complex because there's been significant changes in personnel out of the Red Brick building as well. And in terms of trying to find all the bits of invoices and evidence that supports the claims that have been paid out is a long process. And I guess I'll be completely honest, I don't know if it will fully reconcile at this stage. That is something we're still working through and trying to get all the necessary evidence.
Okay. Last question on this particular subject, and then we're going to move on to network boundary defences.
Raise that again, Susie, because I'm not quite clear. My point is, I checked back on government attendance onto the town deal boards. I went back as far as May 24. simply to confirm whether they had. I can't go back any further than November because the minutes haven't been published on the website for the town board. But DWP sent apologies to the November 24th. There was no apologies and nobody turned up for the September 24th meeting. Jessica Jeffries from DWP attended on July 24th. Now, the interesting thing was for May 24, a Jethro Smith from DHC, from Dulac, as it was then, attended. So there's not only been sort of Dulac involved, it looks like they've passed this now over to the DWP for reasons best known for themselves. But the point is that you have not had monthly coverage.
Just a moment. Liz?
DWP has been represented on that advisory body all the way through as one of the partners for how organisations in Glastonbury are working, particularly on the Health and Wellbeing Hub. So DWP is nothing at all to do with the funding.
Mike, no, hang on a sec. So microphone, if possible, please, Sue.
Sorry. They're on the town board advisory as in attendance, or they've sent apologies. As I say, I just noted the change that instead of someone from DLUC coming up or MHCLG, it seems they have passed it over to Jessica Jeffries as of July 24, and she is DWP, and that is quite clear on the attendance sheet at the beginning of the meeting.
It's quite clear on the attendance sheet because it is the local office of DWP, and that representative is there because of some of the project's relevance to DWP, particularly the Health and Wellbeing Hub. And may I just state again that even if people are not able to attend the board meetings, they always have the papers at least 5 days in advance of those meetings, and that includes the update sheets, where the civil servants in the past have said that they like that way of presenting material because it is all on one spreadsheet on different tabs, and they recognise that that has been a helpful way of presenting the updates for each board meeting.
Okay, so we're going
question to Alistair. Alistair didn't answer the question.
to which question? Sorry.
Nicola asked Alistair to give us at least an idea of when this would be completed, and his answer did not include that.
So I think Alistair elaborated that some of the information is beyond his gift, so he can't give a definitive timeline. That's what he said.
Even an answer. And even an idea. Nicola said even an idea of when this might be completed.
I think the word hope was mentioned.
Yeah, just to clarify, so this piece of work we started in March, but it is for the Red Brick Building to provide all the evidence that backs up the money they've been paid throughout 2023.
Surely we must know what money we've given them.
Sorry, we know what money we've given them, but it's the evidence that supports what that money's being spent on. There is a massive gap.
The reconciliation between what they've been paid and what they can substantiate is the problem, Susanna. I'm leaving it there. We're going to go on to network boundary defences for light relief.
Thank you.
Hello there. On the network boundary defences, given that the current risk climate seems to be high, and the diverse, I know from your report, the diverse and possible unsupported devices, boundary devices that are there, this approach is pretty passive. Wouldn't you have scheduled a external pen test, boundary pen test or something like that, to give better assurance that our current state is satisfactory?
Yeah. On specific cybersecurity measures which could highlight vulnerabilities in the network security, I'm going to ask for a written update from the experts, unless you wanted to add anything specific, Alistair.
I think this is okay to say in the public domain. You're probably aware of the cyber assessment framework that's run by the National Cyber Security Office. It's a framework for ensuring that authorities have good cybersecurity arrangements in place. We did do an audit last year, an advisory piece to do a gap analysis on it. The authority are at the moment having external assessment done on that, which will give a good overview to its strengths and weaknesses around the cybersecurity. So that might be useful information, obviously not in the public domain, that the Audit Committee might be interested in, but would also go some way to evaluating and managing the risk around cybersecurity as well.
If you did want a specific update on the specific test you were asking about, I might suggest that you put it in writing. We'll make sure you get a written response, Steve. Okay. Right, so to move on to item 11, which is the... Is it pressing on? Okay, so thank you. So I'm going to move on to item 11, which is the waivers and breaches report. This item does contain a confidential appendix A. If there's any discussion of the content of the appendix, we will need to take a vote to move into a closed session. So, Paul, did you want to kick us off?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. I've sent the report through. This is in response to a quarterly requirement arising out of last year's audit meeting to give you an update on the quarterly figures for waivers and breaches for the authority.
But for those people that haven't been in the room for this exciting topic previously, do you want to explain the difference between a waiver and a breach, Paul?
Certainly. The figures provided are for Q4 for last year. Key difference: waiver is a non-adherence to standard processes, public contract regulations, Procurement Act, or contract procedures rule, but there is an accepted justified reason for it, which usually sits within the legislation.
So a waiver, you've got a note from your mum, and
yeah, if you like.
Yeah, and for a breach,
you don't. Is non-adherence for a non-permitted justified reason. So the waivers we have to note. The breaches are the more concerning ones as they present a greater risk to the authority of challenge around the decision and non-adherence to our processes. So the main body of the report gives you the figures. I would point out on the waivers side of things, there is a bit of a spike in volume for February. That is pretty normal as people start raising orders for the next financial year. So we do see a bit of a spike in the February time. But there is nothing in there unduly concerning. The breaches, which are the area we should focus on more, I think, is drawn to attention is the number within adult services and housing, 9 for that period with a value of 1.6 million. All of those sit within housing specifically, and I'll give you advance notice that there are further related breaches in what will be Q1 for this financial year from the same area for the same reason. There are 2 minor, smaller ones in community, place and economy, and one in resources, strategy and transformation. So those are the basic numbers. I can provide further detail on those, but that would need to be in closed session and is within the confidential appendix.
Okay, so anyone wishing to raise questions which don't refer to the specific numbers in the confidential appendix? No. So does anyone wish to raise a question concerning the confidential appendix? Right, in which case now we need to take a vote to move into closed session. So I need a proposer. Sue, a seconder. Suzanne. Oh, sorry, Lindy, is your question a non-confidential question?
My question is confidential.
Sorry, Lindy, the microphone broke up. Is your question a non-confidential one?
It's confidential.
Okay, that's fine. Let's move the vote on moving into a confidential session. It's been proposed and seconded. So show of hands, all those in favour wishing to move to closed session. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for coming, Andrew. Sorry to boot you out. Right. Claire, can you confirm that the online broadcast isn't available to anyone that shouldn't be in the room.